Welcome to Best in Faction.
The next generation.
A podcast where our big tracks are very real and not 3D printed.
I'm Tyler.
I'm Nick.
And I am Lucas.
And man, oh man, has it been a minute. Whew! We have not done the show in a number of weeks. It is good to be back. No particular reason. Haven't had anything going on at all. Definitely haven't participated in any tournaments or traveling or whatnot. I am, of course, kidding. This has been the craziest month and a half of 40K of my life. I assume the same for my brothers on screen over here. Since we were last on talking about how 10th edition was, we had RTTs, we had GTs, we had a Super Major in Tacoma, but we're not going to talk about any of that today, because today, of all days, is all about the greatest tournament in the history of the universe. It is, of course, the World Team Championship USA, baby! For those of y'all who have not been following, we'll break down what the WTC is and all that good stuff in just a minute, but it was this past weekend, held in Mechelen, Belgium. All three members of TNG were in attendance. Lucas was starting. Nick and I were coaching and playing in singles. It was awesome. And we're going to be breaking down all that good stuff for you today. If you've never heard of any of this nonsense, don't worry. We're going to give you all the details. But if you also have been paying attention to this, like it's the World Cup, we'll also give you a bunch of fun insights into how things were going. You get to hear all about the orc list that Lucas brought here, our team comp, pairings, rings processes, games in particular. It's going to be a ball and a biscuit. You're not going to want to miss it. But before we get into all of the nitty gritty, and buckle up, boys, it's going to be a bit of a long one if I had to guess. How are you guys doing today? What's going on in the outer TNG sphere? How you doing today, Lucas?
I'm doing great. Like Tyler said, it's been a crazy couple of weeks of just lots of travel, lots of things going on. And so the last couple of days have been the first time in many weeks where we've kind of gotten to sit down and be like, all right, let's kind of take stock of all the crazy stuff that's happened in the last little while. So had a ton of fun over in Europe. We were there. Let's see. At some point, we'll release some like travel vlog related tidbits and kind of recapping our journey and that kind of stuff. But our overall trajectory started in like late July. I think July like 26th or something like that. And
yeah,
that included like driving to California, flying from California. Tyler and I flew from California to practice weekend at Sean's in Connecticut, and then from there flying to Frankfurt, seeing a bunch of different things in Europe before the event. And it was just like, it was a ton of fun, but it was many weeks of just nonstop travel, sleeping in new places all the time, discovering new things all the time. And it was a lot, but we had a ton of fun. And now that it's all over, it's been nice to have a couple of days to kind of reflect on it all and appreciate all the fun memories that we created in Europe. So yeah, feeling great overall. The good news is more fun 40K on the horizon, which I'm sure we'll talk about toward the end of the show. But yeah, feeling great overall. I'm just super happy with how the trip went and how much fun it was. How about you, Nick? How are you doing these days? He's frozen. Nice.
classic, dude.
Do you want to tell us how you've been lately, Tyler? Mr.
Sure,
Travel
man.
continues.
The chaos never ends, dude. I just want to sleep in the same bed for like 3 nights in a row. Is that too, and to not share it with Lucas? That's the other request. Yeah, like Lucas said, it's been almost a month at this point of nonstop travel, and I'm not done yet. I also moved in the last 48 hours. Like, we drove back up from California to Portland, and like Monday morning we woke up in Belgium. Tuesday morning we woke up in Lisbon. Wednesday morning we woke up in San Francisco. Thursday morning I woke up in Portland and moved. Friday morning I woke up in a different house in Portland and finished moving, did 2 job interviews, and then got on a plane back to California. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I just want to go to bed. But it's been awesome. It's been so much fun. Warhammer is really fun. As much as like we can talk crap and about 10th edition. Spending time with the people that you like spending time with, playing the silly game has been a really good time. really looking forward to doing more of it in the future. Would just like a nap first and maybe 3 or 4 more of these lovely iced coffees. So, we're making it can do, but overall, I think this has just been an absolute blast. I'm feeling very left out that I forgot to bring my jerseys with me to California. Y'all are in your jerseys right now, and I just left all of mine in Portland. But they also all smell terrible. I haven't laundered any of them yet. I don't know if y'all laundered yours. But whatever the case may be, doing great. How you doing, Nick, now that you're slightly less frozen?
Yeah, our epic internet working again. Yeah, about the jerseys. I've not washed all of mine yet. This is actually my last clean one, so I was very lucky to find our prototype one still unworn. But yeah, I mean, I'm feeling good. I feel lucky that I somehow got off not getting sick from either of you guys, even though we shared a hotel room for like 2 weeks. I've been waiting, maybe every day I'll wake up and feel sick. For those who don't know, Lucas started getting sick like halfway through our trip, and then Tyler did like near the very end. But yeah, I've been getting pretty lucky so far. And I kind of went into this tournament excited to play, excited to coach, excited to like meet everyone and just see the WTC for the first time. But I kind of also went with the expectation of I'm just gonna like after this just kind of wait for like that September balance patch to come, because outside of teams, like the game is not that fun to play. And I actually surprisingly kind of came back feeling very reinvigorated. I think being around people who are super excited about Warhammer for a week makes you much more excited about the game again. And there was a ton of cool lists that I saw. And also kind of like once the WTC is over, a bunch of people are really excited to share their list innovations that they came up with and all these like creative decisions that they've made. And just, I don't know, some of those armies, especially Thousand Sons, I've just been like watching them and like listening to like how those lists are played. And it's just made me really excited about the game again. Because I mean, that's what keeps Warhammer interesting for me, is trying to like learn new things and figure these lists out. So yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling excited. I'm glad to be talking with you guys again because it's been a while. So yeah.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, jumping on into some of our main content for the bit. If you're super familiar with WTC and all this nonsense, you can probably skip forward a couple minutes because we're going to give some basic breakdowns for those of y'all who may not know what the hell we're talking about. So, I think I'm going to pass the mic back to Nick on this one because Lucas is going to have a lot of things to say about the actual event, and I don't know how to shut up anyway. Nick, what is the WTC? What's the basic philosophy behind it? What's going on here? And so what are the core mechanics?
Yeah. I will preface this by saying that there's a ton of content out there that has already talked about like the history of the WTC, especially Typhus over in StatCheck. The event has been going on for a long, long time. And if you want like the real deep history of that, there's a lot better content for that. We are still very new to it. But basically what we know about the WTC and what you need to know to understand what we're going to be talking about is that it is the World Team Championships of Warhammer 40K. The WTC itself, I think, has only been going on. I think this was its 3rd year. Before that, it was formerly known as the ETC, or European Team Championship. But eventually enough countries from around the world started coming that they were like, all right, let's change it to the WTC. And I think there was some sort of organizational shift stuff as well. But basically it's a tournament where you get you apply as an 8-man team to get your country approved. And you have a captain and 8 players, and you basically just show up and play Teams 40K, which we've talked about on the show before. Yeah.
Yeah, so the real exciting thing about this is that it is entirely nationalized, right? Every country that shows up is allowed to bring exactly one team. The logistics of how that happens are complicated and not the point of the show today. But we are members of the only team that the U.S. is allowed to send, no matter how many people you have. By contrast, things like the U.K. gets 4 teams because all their little countries get a team, which is very silly. But you're up there, you're up there representing your country. Rob Helton of Sister Act asks, "Is there a requirement to be good to be this is good looking to be on the team?" Which we appreciate the compliment, Rob. We love you a lot. Check out Sister Act, by the way. It's the best sisters podcast in all of 40K, and it's not close. I don't know what the second is, but I'm sure it's not close. So we're all very excited to be representing the team there. Like other team formats here, each faction is represented exactly once across your team. We have 8 different players playing 8 different factions, and a big part of the event itself is coming down to the pairings process of deciding who's going to play against whom. Again, check out Enter the Matrix and Stat Check and whatnot if you want to hear more details about how the pairings process works. But in general, teams allows you to bring a lot of really interesting lists that maybe don't necessarily work so well in singles because they have one obvious terrible matchup, Koth Eldar in 10th edition 40k, because you can usually pair around 1 or 2 matchups that you don't want to run into, but you want to bring a lot of lists that do jobs. So let's run down on the front end here what the squad was looking like for Team USA. Lucas, can you run us through the 8 players on the roster and at least just what faction they were playing, or maybe a couple words on their archetype? What was Team USA this year as far as the top 8 is concerned?
Sure, and I'm sure one of you guys will step in at the end when I inevitably forget someone, because every time I've recounted this so far, I've forgotten the last person. So our team was captained by Sean Naden, playing Monster Mash Tyranids. So this was like a bunch of Carnifexes and Execrate, some Tyrannifex, Maliceptor, just big bugs all day, and then a Points Factory with Spore Mines in the back. So that was list number 1. List number 2 was Anthony Vanel playing CSM good stuff, basically. Abaddon, his squad of Terminator homies, and then some Forge Fiends and Obliterators to shoot people off the table. We had the 2 Art of War boys, Jack and John. Jack was playing Grey Knights, 20 Terminators, 10 Paladins, and Imperial Agent allies. Basically a big neutralizer list that can go up against some other heavy hitters, to a certain extent, and kind of blunt them with all of the tricks that Grey Knights have to offer. And especially in shooting matchups, this list was really powerful at just kind of blunting the offensive. And then John was playing Custodes. He had 2 squads of 9 Guard, 2 squads of 6 Wardens, 2 Blade Champs, 2 Shield Captains, and some Prosecutors for scoring. So 4 big bricks of Custodians led by 4 Chad characters. Very cool list. Very good as an early defender to grab those heavy tables and just lock down the objectives. So those were our first 4 lists. We had Matt Shuckman playing Eldar. Not a lot to say here. Eldar is just an incredibly solid army. We didn't bring Wraithguard in our Eldar list. A lot of European countries did. Ours focused more on those tank hulls that do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of damage. And then obviously we had a Wraith Knight as well. Let's see. We've got myself playing Orcs. I had what I liked to call, what I had dubbed by the end of the weekend, the Carmy, which was 9 squads of Orc boys of some variety inside of 9 cars. That's 6 trucks and 3 big tracks. And then just fill in with stuff. So 3 squads of Storm Boys, some Gretchen, some KMKs, just lots of presence all across the board. And we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about what kind of role this filled in the pairings process and what kind of matchups we try to slot myself into. Let's see. We had Jaime Paris playing Deathwatch. Mostly a bog standard Deathwatch list. More Proteus kill teams than the Europeans were bringing, but still the same staples. Some Deathwatch veterans, some Desolators, that kind of thing. Oh, don't tell me. GSC. We have Eric Forsman playing GSC. Again, nothing like our Eldar list. It's very bog standard. It's 20 or 30 Bombas. I don't remember the exact number.
30
Bombas, 70 Neophytes, Aberrants, and filled with characters.
Yep. Sweet. So that right there is our 8. That is Team USA. And we brought, I think, probably one of the more interesting team comps. I think Australia was the big, what the hell is going on over here? And then Poland bringing both Guard and Tau. I think, did England also bring both Guard and Tau? No?
England did not have Tau, but they had Guard.
Yeah, they had Guard, yeah. Poland bringing both Guard and Tau was fairly interesting. But we showed up with Orcs, which none of the other top teams had. We showed up with Grey Knights, which none of the other teams of any kind had. And we showed up with a NIDS list that was very unlike what other people had been taking. So people were very excited to see some of our team comp there. We left at home, in order to make those armies happen, a couple of really interesting choices that were very popular. We left at home Thousand Suns, which I think we mostly agree was a miss on our part. But then we also left at home Necrons, which I maintain was totally the right call. Some people disagree with me on that. But Necrons were also very popular, and we did not have those. And then obviously we left at home the more body spam Tyranids that a lot of people were playing in order to play this wonky Naden list. The data would suggest that we made some good decisions in these cases. Obviously, we're gonna work our way up there, but the punchline is that we ended up coming in second overall, which is badass as hell. Having fallen behind only Poland, which we were the only team to draw into. Everyone else they defeated, so that ends up feeling real good. So I think overall this team comp was solid as hell. What do you think about the team comp overall, Nick?
Yep, there we go. Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head, basically. A lot of people were messing with us or making fun of us for not taking Necrons, but kind of in our internal testing, we found that Necrons basically had one playstyle, which was park your army in front of them and, tell them, like, can you kill me or not? And in teams, you get to control that a little bit, but because they're not, like, really huge scorers unless your opponent messes up, you kind of you don't want to have to babysit them in the pairings process. So you kind of throw them away early, which means sometimes they just get like the shit end of the stick and then they just lose. I think not bringing them was totally fine. I think Thousand Suns we definitely could have spent a little more time on. Unfortunately, we didn't really have a lot of players looking into them. A lot of players weren't super familiar with them. It was pretty much just Jack and I was spending like most of my time trying to figure out Necrons because those were like obviously very strong. So we ended up not taking them. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe it wasn't. But there was definitely some cool lists there. I liked the Grey Knights list a lot, though, because pretty much every team came up to us and they were like, we have no idea what this list is trying to do. And that's a very powerful strength in the pairings process. A lot of people came up to Lucas's list as well. And they were like, we don't really know what this list is trying to do, but we have an idea. And most of the time they were wrong, which was very funny to see. I think a lot of people thought it was an Eldar counter, and we'll get into that more. It was absolutely not. Eldar killed like 4 trucks a turn. But yeah, seeing people try to figure that one out and trying to figure out the Grey Knights list was like a very strong advantage that I think we had. So yeah, I feel excited about our team, and it was cool seeing it when it got to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an appropriate segue then, Lucas. Could you talk to us a little bit about what it is that your list actually was designed to do now that we're, post-event, the NDAs or whatever are expired, we can say whatever the hell we want. Why did we bring this wonky orc list? What was it trying to do, and what were you able to do with it as a result of that?
Yeah, so the orcs list was definitely really interesting. I can basically take none of the credit for its creation, by the way. Sean did all of the work in making this reality, and I just ended up happening to play it, basically. It's definitely an interesting list. It feels very unassuming when you read it. When you see it on the table, it's definitely a different story, though, because it has a ridiculous amount of board presence. The total unit count is like, I forget exactly what it is.
30.
Like 28 or 29
30.
or something like that. It's 30?
It's 30.
Yeah, so 3 of those units end up being characters that are attached. So in reality, you have like 27 units to play the game with. What that means is that fixed secondaries are super easy. This was something that was built into the list basically from square one before we even had any idea of like what units were going to be in it. Sean was thinking, what units do we pull out into the list for cheap that can just do actions, accomplish the points, stand on the objectives, and try to win the game that way. So fixed was basically part of the list design from the ground up, especially the deploy teleport homer secondary, which once it got buffed, giving 3 points to the middle. Basically, you sack 1 truck every single turn, go into the middle, 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, 3 points. You got 15 points. That's most of an entire secondary just accomplished flat out. And then you can do other board control related secondaries like cleanse, behind enemy lines, If your opponent gives up a kill one, that's nice. Or like worst case scenario, you can do engage just to get some extra points, not having to interact with your opponent hardly at all. So that's the idea with the list. The damage ceiling of the list is relatively low. We don't really actually have that many units that do damage, good, reliable damage in orcs, at least for cheap. So the idea was we'll just throw our whole army away, deny the opponent as many points as possible, and accomplish as many points as possible while en route to that. The problem of 10 orc boys in trucks is something that a lot of armies in 40k don't have amazing solutions to, because damage is so front-loaded in 10th edition. It's like, here's my unit with a ton of damage that'll drop on you and do just, blow everything to hell. Or here's my one tank that'll just shoot the hell out of your one thing. It's very nice to just have a garbage 50-point throwaway truck that you're totally fine losing. And then the 10 guys inside that actually do the heavy lifting, take the objective back, who also aren't that hard to kill, or who also are relatively hard to kill, I should say, can then come out and actually do what the list is supposed to do and accomplish the objectives and steal them back from the opponent, that kind of thing. In terms of what matchups the list really wanted to see, something that our opponents definitely were caught off guard by was just how good the GSC matchup is for the orcs. We had it down as a very safe, stable, neutral matchup, what we call a yellow, which is the expected result is somewhere between an 8 and 12. This was definitely pretty conservative. If the orcs go first, they can take the whole table, neutralize the drop turn, and then the damage problem with the orc list is not really a thing against GSC, because it is not hard at all to kill, swarms of 20 cultists with orc boys. Killing a T3 body with a 5-up armor is paltry for orcs to do. And I've got, tons of units that can do that kind of thing. So the GSC matchup is excellent. I ended up playing against GSC 3 times over the weekend. I'll when we talk about the boards I was playing on, I can run you guys through just how I had so much success in that matchup. But GSC was an excellent matchup. And then some other matchups, especially those revolving a little bit more around getting up close to the opponent, standing on the objectives, being all about board control. I was just able to do that same game plan, but just even better. So, for example, Thousand Suns, a very close range army that relies a lot on tricks and fragile strategies and clockwork to work. The orcs can just, under the right situation, under the right scenario, on the right table, just swamp the Thousand Suns, remove key pieces of their game plan, and just prevent them from scoring any points. Same thing with Necrons. Necrons are all about, just putting my Lich, put the Lich Guard brick on the objective and park it there and score X number of points. And the orcs can just bog down the Lich Guard with trucks, put boys on the objective, prevent the Necron player from ever controlling it, and then just eke out a narrow to decent win. A lot of people were thinking the list was designed to play against Eldar. That's definitely not true. I never actually played against Eldar, and I had very limited testing against it. But my theory, anyway, is that the Wraith Knight just kind of blasts 2 units a turn, and then as soon as I poke my head out, the rest of the Eldar army just picks up orc units in a big hurry. So I don't actually think the Eldar army is very good, or the Eldar matchup is very good. But maybe I could be wrong. Maybe I just score enough points that it ends up being fairly neutral. Who knows? But yeah, the whole idea is the list might have some very bad matchups in the form of knights and custodies that just table you or stand on the objectives better than you. But it has enough other stable or good matchups that it can kind of just weave its way around the couple of bad ones in the classic teams fashion. And then the list doesn't get big wins, but if it doesn't get a bad matchup, it has a very stable points floor and always does respectably at the very least, even if it's getting tabled. There's no, of particular note before you step in here, Tyler, there's no key linchpin units in the list, right? At the end of the day, everything is just either a car or 10 guys inside or some screening trash unit that I'm totally fine losing. So it was feeling very nice in 10th edition, which is all about these big bricks that are just hammering the hell out of each other, to just have a bunch of garbage that I'm totally fine losing en masse as long as I'm accomplishing the points that I need to accomplish.
For sure. So as a GSC player, it's pretty clear to me why this army is going to be really effective in the GSC, and I think other GSC players can also see there are problems here. We don't kill 8 units very well. All of this pressure, all of this screening, this is going to be a problem if you know what you're doing. But I don't think it's necessarily quite as obvious to Necron players how this is supposed to work, because, like, as a, Necron's 101, like, 10 Lich Guard kill 10 boys in combat 10 times out of 10. Like, what are we missing here that makes this functional? Because people paired that a lot. They liked it. Why? What are you able to do that mitigates that threat, that actually allows you to take objectives from a Necron player without just, getting cut in the face?
Yeah, so kind of what we realized was Necrons are good at killing orcs if they have the right units lining up into the right target, right? Like, if they just shoot all their anti-tank at all the trucks for 3 turns, all the trucks will die. And if all the Lich Guard fight all the boys for 3 turns, then all the boys will die. But the orcs are faster, and they have the initiative on, like, how to engage with the Necrons, especially because the onus is on Necrons to move onto the objectives first. Just because they really only have 2 units that can do that. So they have to do that like very early on in the game. Otherwise, they're not going to score any points. So the Lich Guard move forward. And then what I want to avoid as the Orc player is their tanks shooting at my tanks and their infantry fighting my infantry. So my tanks go fight their infantry and my infantry go fight their tanks. All I need to do is get the DDAs and the Locust Heavies in combat with boys as soon as possible, and then get the Lich Guard bogged down with trucks as soon as possible, because Necrons have no way to really fall back, shoot or charge, do anything of that nature. As soon as you've tagged the Lich Guard with trucks, they're stuck there for a long time. And the only member of the Lich Guard squad that's actually killing trucks with any reliability is the Overlord. So if that guy's out of position or something like that, it's going to take the Necron players several, like 3, 4, 5 fight phases to cut their way through 2 or 3 trucks. So all it really takes is, the Orc player gets 10 boys out, runs them onto objective, sick. OC 20-ish on the objective. Nice. And then you get 2 or 3 trucks. You charge the Lich Guard that are on the objective. You base a bunch of models so they can't go anywhere. All of a sudden, the Orc player is OC 25 on the objective, and the Necron player has to decide to either fall back and cede the objective for an entire turn, and then the trucks just charge them again next turn, or they stay there and, for several command phases, that objective is under Orc control. Part of the reason this is so effective is because the DDA gun is blast, so it can't actually shoot into combat with the trucks. So if the Lich Guard want to receive the fire support from the DDAs, then they have to fall back from the trucks, and then they're giving ground. So this very often results in the Necrons slowly tabling the Orcs. By the end of turn 4 or 5, the Orcs maybe have their Gretchen and a couple custom mega cannons and a truck or 2 left on the board in total, and the Necrons have most of their army. But it doesn't really matter because the objectives have been under Orc control for the entire game, basically. And because there's only 2 Lich Guard bricks, they can only really be on 2 of the 3 midfield objectives anyway. So I can just hold the other third objective with some garbage 40-point unit, and it's basically never going to get contested.
Yeah. Another thing that we tested that I think is important is right before the event, they buffed that Transcendent Catan by giving him reanimation protocols. So we saw a ton of those in everyone's lists. And we were like, well, this might give people some trouble, because one of the weaknesses of your list is that it gives up fixed, right? Like, it gives up Big Game Hunter in spades. So if someone can take Big Game Hunter in something like Homers, then maybe they might be able to hold you to the same on secondary. And then it just comes down to how well do they play primary. So we wanted to see, okay, how well does this Transcendent Catan do into you? And I know we talked about your list not being able to do a lot of damage, but we actually found out your list is surprisingly able to kill that thing in 1 turn. So that was another thing that I think we were really hoping a Necron player would try to vibe check Lucas with that, but they all kind of played their Catans off to the side against you.
Yeah, they play them pretty conservatively, which is definitely the right call. Yeah, I mean, the list can do concentrated damage in one place if it really needs to, but it's not its forte. The Transcendent Catan is really good for slipping in behind enemy lines and scoring some points and that kind of thing. It is very difficult to get around behind this Orc list and take its backfield. There's just so much stuff in the list that screening out just a single model like that or a single unit dropping in is incredibly easy. For context, I regularly find ways to 3-inch screen my entire deployment zone against Genestealer cults with ease. So screening a single Transcendent Catan from popping up in my backfield to do homers and that kind of thing is paltry.
Yeah, it's also worth noting, if anyone in the audience is like, oh man, I want to go try this list, and then goes and gets wrecked in one of these quote-unquote good matchups, this is an incredibly technical list to play, Right. We did not put Lucas on an orc list that just sort of deploys on the line and goes, as much as it looks like that's what's happening. The combat minutia and the screening minutia and the tempo minutia is really, really finicky. And we were really excited to get Lucas on this because those are all things that he is very well practiced in. And like we say the GSC matchup is very good. We had to play it a lot of times before Lucas was consistently winning it. And it was, I think that was one of my favorite parts of this whole process was getting you and Sean ready for that matchup of like, hey, you know, we can beat GSC, and getting to see you execute that repeatedly in actual games in the WTC was sick as hell, dude. What were your records against GSC and against Necrons?
If I recall correctly, I beat GSC round 1, 14-6. Then I played against Necrons, and then I tied them 10-10. I played against Necrons and beat them 13-7. I played against Germany's GSC and won 15-5. And then I played Thousand Suns twice, and in the very last round, I played against Sweden's GSC once more and won 16-4, 15-5, something like that.
Hell yeah.
So 14, 15, 15 against GSC, and then a 10 and a 13 against Necrons.
Let's go, bro. Sweet. Okay, so that's Lucas's list. Like Nick said, the Grey Knights list was a lot of fun for the psychic damage more than anything else. That was a list that we were hoping to put into Eldar. Never actually ended up happening, but in theory, he was definitely ready for that. Grey Knights, if you haven't read their rules yet or played against them, are absolutely cracked. They are very good at not getting shot at if they don't want to. Unfortunately, that means sometimes that they're not very good at holding primary, because if you're not getting shot at, you're probably not holding primary. But they were a lot of fun. And then the third list that I want to mention in a little bit more detail is Sean Naden's Tyranids list. This is something that we workshopped a lot. He did make a couple of interesting changes at the last second to it that we were not necessarily super fans of by the time we were practicing with it, but it's a really solid list. Like every Sean Naden list, it takes a little bit of Naden to actually make it sing, but as an archetype, I think this is still going to be very effective. I mean, we're getting a Tyranids Codex in a couple weeks, so like don't read into it too much, but I want to let y'all know because I'm sure people are curious what the hell is going on here. So he's got a Hive Tyrant with Lashbone, Own Venom Cannon, and Adaptive Biology for the Feel No Pain. He's got a Neuro Tyrant with Synaptic Linchpin because points. He's got Old One Eye. He's got 2 Biovores, 2 Carnifexes. This is the crazy thing. 2 Carnifexes, each of which have 2 paired Death Spitters with Slimer Maggots. So no melee Carnifexes, all guns, and all Death Spitters, which is like the weird middle child gun. He's got an Exocrine, 2 Lictors, a Maliceptor, 3 Solo Pyrovores, a Trigon, and 2 Tyrannifexes with Acid Spray. This list is also written specifically to counter GSC. Our big picture idea as a team was there are 2 armies right now that are way too good. There are Eldar and there's GSC. A lot of other stuff is also very good, but those 2 are like crazy points getters. You're not going to beat Eldar. Like the Grey Knights can try, but like that's just... We're trying to blunt Eldar as best as we can with player skill, basically. But GSC, you can write lists around. You absolutely can. They're maybe not great in singles. They're maybe terrible into Eldar, but you can beat them. And this NIDS list is absolutely one of those. And the reason that this NIDS list is so good into GSC, because people I'm sure are curious, is GSC cannot kill Tyrannifexes and Maliceptors. They just can't. Certainly not efficiently. Tyrannifexes are -1 damage, demo charges are 2 damage. Problem. D3 damage for seismic cannons. Problem. They're T12, so demos wound on 4s, seismics wound on 6s until you pop the +1 to wound. It's not good. Maliceptors are immune to demo charges because they have a 6-inch aura of -1 to hit. So you drop in on a Maliceptor to demo bomb it, and suddenly you're hitting on 6s. Spend a CP, hit on 5s, and then it has a 4-up invuln. I don't like it. You're like, all right, cool. Well, that's a bummer. But like, I can still kill the Carnifexes, right? Carnifexes aren't that durable, and you're right. The only problem is a squad of Carnifexes with 4 Death Spitters each, and Old One Eye have Chapter Master and Sustained with their... how many freaking shots was this unit? I can't even remember. It's a lot.
Isn't it like 36 or something?
That sounds approximately correct. Ranged weapons, deathspitters. Yeah, it's 6 shots, so it's 24 shots because it's 12 shots a dude. So it's 24 shots hitting on 6s. 6 is double hit and rerolling everything. So you're on average getting 4, and then 3 is 7, is then 14 in hits. Plus also the bioplasma, which is assault D3 blast. Plus also the spine banks, which are 6-inch range assault, or 6-inch range assault, 5 more shots, right? So there's just a pile of shots here that with all the dice rolls, on average, dumpsters 10 acolytes. It won't kill a full 20-man neophyte squad, but it'll put a hurting on them, and it'll just kill a bomba squad. And
on Overwatch.
On Overwatch.
Yep.
And all of the Euro lists are more bomba heavy than we are. A lot of them have 4 or even 5 bomb squads, which is nuts. I'll talk all about GSC later on. I'm definitely going to do an episode in a week or two all about how to play GSC in 10th because it's crazy. Maybe after the balance patch, depending on how hard we get hit. We'll see. Kind of depends on scheduling. But that means that those Carnifexes are also unassailable. And I know that all of you people who think you're really good at GSC, myself included, approach that like, yeah, but like I can be good at Warhammer and avoid that, you know? I can cut the angle and only get shot by 1 Carnifex, or I can, get a beat on only old One Eye, or I can do this, that, or the other thing. Cool, dude. Sean Naden can also be really good at Warhammer, as it turns out. So we spent like most of practice weekend repping this, and the first couple of times, I dumpstered him. But once he figured out what all the right screening beats were, how to use spore mines and L's, and the table edge, and really careful positioning to actually block out all the deep strikes from doing the things you want them to, this is an unwinnable matchup for GSC if it's played perfectly by the Tyranids. It is unwinnable. And Sean did that a couple of times. I know he blew the Polish GSC player out of the water. I don't know if he played another GSC other than that. He played into Custodes a lot, which this was also excellent into. I know, Nick, you and him had practiced that a bunch at practice weekend, and those Carnifex Death Spitters were nasty into Custodes.
Yeah, that shit was not okay, dude.
Hell yeah, dude. Something else to know about...
7-2-1 ignore cover is like...
Sustained.
I have absolutely zero way to reduce this damage at all, and it's like perfectly efficient into me. Yikes.
Yeah. It's nasty. Something else to note about the Carnifexes, if just in case you manage to somehow get a Bomba Squad in there, is to remember that they have Blood Surge. So if they take a damage, they move D6 plus 2 and can end that move in combat. So you're like, oh yeah, I got to go kill those Carnifexes with demo charges, but they've got 2-up saves. So like, I better shoot him with a Ridge Runner first to apply a Crossfire token. Oops, he failed a save. Uh-oh, I'm in combat. Have fun.
Yeah.
Yikes, dude.
This was some spicy tech that we never really got to incorporate, which was the Zoanthrope thing you were talking about. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Sean was complaining at one point over practice. He was like, man, I wish I could just make them fail a save so they could do the thing. And I'm like, Sean, where are your Zoanthropes? So if you're trying to play this list and you want to try something else, add a unit of Zoanthropes for this very weird specific niche reason, which is that Zoanthropes provide an aura of 6-up invuln, which you're usually like, yeah, it's cool for Gribblies, but like, why do the big guys need it? Like, they've got good saves. The reason isn't that the Carnifexes want a 6-up invuln is so they can choose to take it instead of their 2-up armor save when someone shoots a Ridge Runner mortar at them or similar, and almost guaranteed fail a save, and then suddenly, boom, combat. Have fun shooting them, and now old One Eye's in combat, and you're dead.
This is such a clown game that we play.
I love it so much, dude. So there's your hot nids tech of the day. Old One Eye, 2 Carnifexes with Death Spitters, and use a unit of Zoanthropes as the missing piece to make that unit go all the way. It's very funny. The Trigon is also an absolute massive problem for GSC because it natively deep strikes at 3 inches, so it ingresses at 3 inches. So in order to protect your blips, you need to both make sure that he can't 3-inch deep strike to destroy the blips, which is doable, very doable, but also make sure he can't ingress somewhere at 3 inches and then move in advance at move 12 and get to blips while he's taking the whole table. It's
a little more challenging.
It's a little bit tricky. And again, this is one of those things of like, if you and your buddy go pick these lists up, you may find yourself able to crush it. You got to abuse the player skill when you have it, and we do in Sean. Sean is a very funny individual, but he's very good at Warhammer. He's got the record to show that. He was. I think he may have been our top performer this week, despite being on a very unimpressive list into the field. Got him decent matchups. He performed right up until we fed him to an Eldar player and they 20-0'd him in 20 minutes. It was very funny. But yeah, so that's the team. I'm going to consider that, unless you guys have anything else you want to mention about the lists before we jump into the actual event itself. I'm going to call that a wrap on the lists section. And we can kind of move into some event review as the sort of normal TNG beats.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can go over the structure of the event.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the... Talk to us about that, Nick. What's going on here?
Yeah, so the WTC main event, it happens over, I think it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it happens over 4 days, although Thursday is just a half day. So it's really 3.5 days. It is 7 rounds. Each round you are given 4.5 hours you're given 4.5 hours. You're given half an hour for pairings, and you're given 4 hours to play. Now, sometimes the pairings go over the half hour if it's a particularly stressful round, or if setting up the tables takes a little bit too long, or, gathering the, 27 players that we have takes a little bit of time. So when that happens, you just basically take the remaining time in your round and you guys have a clock and you start. But you're given a little bit more than that hour and a half. So the games go on for quite a while. The first 3 rounds of the WTC are the pods phase. So at the beginning of the tournament, a week, 2 weeks beforehand, they'll announce the pods. And what that means is they're seeded pods. So depending on how you finished in the tournament in the previous year, you're either a 4th seed, a 3rd seed, a 2nd seed, or a 1st seed. And there's a 4, 3, 2, 1 in each of the pods. So we were a 1 seed because we got 4th place last year. And so our first round is into the 4th seed. Our round 2 is into the 3rd seed. And our round 3 is into the 2nd seed. And then after that, the remaining 4 rounds, which are Saturday and Sunday, those are, I don't really know what the correct name was for it, but those are basically the remainder of the tournament. At that point on, you end up playing 1st place 2nd, 3rd place 4th, so on and so forth. And you just keep doing that until all of the rounds are over, and then a winner is decided based off of performance.
Absolutely. So there's your format on the event. It's worth noting also, before any of this happens, we did get to partake in the War Masters Singles GT, which was a ton of fun. We're not going to go into too much depth in that because this is mostly a WTC conversation, but that's essentially a super normal singles event. The only thing that's wonky is that it's being played on WTC boards, which we'll talk about terrain in a second. But I took yes, and it's scored off differential, absolutely. I took GSC to that. Nick took Custodes. I think you took the same list you took to Tacoma.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and as did I, so check. I was about to say check out our Tacoma episode, but we didn't do a Tacoma episode. But, check out BCP for the specifics on the list there. I ended up coming in 19th as the top GSC player out of 282 players, which was sick. Was a lot of fun. Went 5-1. Went down to Arna and his Chaos Knights. You can actually find that on Wargames live stream. We had a really good time. Arna's one of the best players in the world. He's from Team Germany. And Chaos Knights on Hammer and Anvil is not a great matchup, but I did not play super great, so apologies if you want to watch that stream and see how to play GSC. It's there's some good moments, but it was not a fantastic performance on my part. Nick, I know the matchups didn't go so well for you, and Custodes kind of did what they did. But overall, good time?
Yeah, I had fun. I wish I had more time to practice with my list. Most of practice weekend was basically just playing Necrons 15 times and then some other random Custodes lists that were not my lists. So I basically played the 8 games at Tacoma and then came into the tournament with just those as my reps. So it was a lot of, all right, I've never played this matchup on this board on this mission. Let's see what happens. And yeah, Custodes aren't super fun if you don't really know what you're doing. But yeah, I'm excited about, like I was saying, I'm excited about Thousand Suns and revisiting armies that have a little bit more interesting moving parts. So yeah,
for sure. So as far as War Masters and the WTC are concerned, they're played in the same hall, same stuff. So the event review portion of this will apply to both of them. What did you guys think of the venue? We got to get our, water, food, bathroom, table space review kind of stuff out of the way. What did you guys think of the World Team Championships held in Mechelen, Belgium? What do you think about the venue?
Yeah, I mean, you can go ahead.
Start with Lucas.
Never mind, I'm starting. So yeah, a venue was great. Funny story about getting there. Like the guys mentioned earlier, I ended up getting sick on the way from Frankfurt to Amsterdam. We spent 2 days in Amsterdam, and then on the way to Mechelen, started feeling a lot better. So, woke up in Mechelen the first day, a little bit groggy. The guys were already at the tournament, and I'm like, okay, time to make my way over there. And of course, my dumbass like read the address incorrectly, and didn't enter the actual street name into my phone. So I just went to some random zip code in Mechelen, and I'm like, I don't think this townhouse is where the WTC is. I was on the opposite end of town, and so I walked like an hour and 10 minutes all the way around. Saw all sorts of lovely stuff in Mechelen, so it was definitely worth it. But just a funny story about getting to the venue. So the venue overall was great. It's like a giant, I don't know exactly what it was used for, but it looks like an
I think it's a former
hangar.
aircraft hangar. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
It is huge, and it is very tall as well. But yeah, just felt like a massive space to hang out. And bathrooms were a little bit tight. I think there was like a lot of people in there. And I don't know, maybe not a lot of cleaning going on. Either way, the bathrooms are a little bit left a little bit to be desired, but the food situation was excellent. By contrast to a lot of U.S. events where, sometimes the food situation can be a little sketchy and there's not a lot of options, the food was great. The line progressed at a great pace, and the sausage rolls were delicious. The sandwiches were delicious, and it was also a lot of quantity. Like you got your money's worth, and it was like it was filling. You didn't feel like starving by the time dinner came around. So yeah, the food situation was excellent. Bathrooms were a little bit yikes, but just like the general space that we were hanging out in was amazing, at least in my opinion. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, like Lucas said, the place was massive. So one of my favorite things about that was just the space between tables was like fantastic. It never felt like you were smushed in. I hate those like events where the tables are touching each other, and like if you ever play on Hammer and Anvil, like you can't. And also you're butt to butt with like your buddy behind you. This was just like, yeah, tons of space on the side to put your armies, space to walk around the tables, etc. So space was good. I know the table height less than we desired. For someone like me, the short king, it was pretty fine. But for you guys, I know that you were complaining about your backs hurting. Food and drinks were fantastic. The accessibility was great, and also the pricing was great. Even with the conversion rate, it was basically like when I go to a US event and I buy food there and like a food and drink, it's like maybe like, I don't know, $12 to $15, right? Here it was like €8, which is like maybe 10, like 9 something, and it was also like high quality. The one downside was the first day of War Masters, they kind of didn't really expect there to be as many players and spectators as there were, so they ran out of sandwiches before I even finished my game. So I came over and I'm like, I don't have a sandwich to eat. That's a bummer. But they stepped it up the next few days and they got like a lot more. And they also started bringing in like food carts as well, so you had more options. I know there was like a pizza food cart at one point. There was like a burger and fries food cart at one point. Drinks wise, it was sick that you could drink at the event. There were beers available and they were dirt cheap. They were anywhere between like €2 to €4. And water access was fantastic. After wandering around, Europe for 2 weeks with no access to water whatsoever, having a sparkling and still water, just ice cold water fountain on demand was fantastic. Because you needed that. To the one kind of like other downside about the event hall was there's obviously something like that, there's no AC in there, but there's also like no fans. So kind of like near the end of the day, it starts getting pretty hot in there with the amount of players and just like the general heat. And you start sweating pretty bad. So if you aren't just like, drinking water, it's not going to end up pretty well.
Not only hot, but also very humid and stuffy. So
yeah,
it was great to be able to have access to that. They're just like, super easy. Go to the bar. Hey, I need 10 cups for my team. Yeah. Fill the 10 cups with water. Go. Everyone gets a drink.
Yeah,
it's great.
And I'd agree with you too. The bathroom situation was like fine. It was bigger bathrooms than I've seen at some events. They were cleaner than I've seen at some events. Kind of just the downside of that many people packed into that small of a place over time, things start to get a bit smelly, especially with no fans. So yeah, it was all right. But overall, definitely one of the best like food wise and drink wise and table wise that I've been to, and yeah, it's cool.
Rant time. This is an open letter to all of my European friends. I wrote this up in an angry email, and I'm just going to read it to you all now because that seems like the best way to convey this information. I'm kidding. Hello, Europe. This is Tyler Bortel from the land of freedom. I would like to introduce you to this substance called H2O. It's water. It is a necessary component of all living things in the universe that we know of so far. It's crazy. I understand that it's not particularly abundant. It only covers 74% of the Earth. And I understand that you are definitely deeply impoverished with no welfare state, definitely not incredibly rich countries that take very good care of your people. This stuff is important. It's a basic human right. And Jesus Christ, is there none of it on your entire freaking continent as far as I can tell. Oh my God. The amount of hoops we had to jump through in Frankfurt and in Amsterdam and in Mechelen in order to get just a glass of fucking water. Oh my gosh. We, like, for context for you Euros who have never been into a place with rights, when you go to an establishment in America and they offer for you food, before you've even been handed a menu, you are at all times offered a full pint, 16-ounce glass of frigid water that is like 2/3 ice, so that your thirst may be quenched and you can enjoy it. That water is complimentary, it is expected, and it is infinite. They will bring you as many of those as you want because it's water. It does not cost dollars. It does not cost your fake little euro monies either. It's free because it's water. In Europe, for those of y'all who have never ventured into any of these third world countries, water is not free, it is not plentiful, and it is not cold. There are no water fountains on that entire continent, as far as I can tell. In the airport, if you're very lucky, you can find a dribbly little faucet that can fill your water bottle over the course of an hour. If you go into a restaurant and ask for still water, they will bring you a 24-ounce carafe of what's clearly just tap water that's been in their fridge, which is cold-ish. They've never heard of ice. And they will cost you €6, which is to say just under $7. What the fuck is happening? It was a disaster. As a person, generally, if I go to a meal in the U.S., I'll go through 3 or 4 waters. So the idea that I would be paying upwards of $15 for that privilege and for it to still be not cold, unimaginable. It was a disaster. It was my least favorite thing about the trip. Almost everything else about Europe was wonderful, other than their trains, which are a scam. Stop listening to them say that their trains are incredible. I'm sure they're generally incredible. We had terrible experiences. But the water situation, I will offer no condolences and no forgiveness on because it's a disaster. Y'all need to get your shit together. But that is all to say that by contrast to this, the water situation at the event, as has been pointed out by my compatriots here earlier, was splendid. They had, as Nick was saying, or as Luke was saying, 2 different taps. One was water that was very cool, very cold, and one was sparkling water on tap for free, infinite, until they ran out of sparkling water, which, happens. It's the carbon dioxide canisters are limited in size. But even then, the regular water was still flowing the whole time. Fill up whatever you want, as much as you want, have a cup, it's free. It was great. Big fan of that. Way better water situation than at most U.S. events, frankly, because in the U.S. you end up with think about the FLG events where they're tiny little cups and they're 5-gallon tanks. Which is fine. It's just not great. So big thumbs up to them on that. Anyway, rant over. We're done talking about water for now. I'll bring it up again later, I'm sure. But something else that hasn't been mentioned yet that was fantastic at both War Masters and WTC was the judging. Oh my gosh. In the U.S., it is such a pain. At just U.S. events, there are a couple of judges going around. You're having to scream and wave your hands to get them tracked down. When you scream for a judge, everyone's looking at you like, oh man, what's happening? One of you two is clearly being an asshole, either because you can't figure this out yourself, It's super awkward, and then the judge gets there, and then they don't know the rules because they're a volunteer who's just there or out of the goodness of their own heart to help the community, not a 40K super rules enthusiast, because, like, why would they be? Totally understandable. But here, all of that is different. There were tons of judges there everywhere. I think they were talking about it on Fireside this week. When you call for a judge, everyone around you is like, oh man, that guy needs a judge. And everyone around you starts calling for a judge, just trying to find someone. They're everywhere. It takes no time to find them. They're all super knowledgeable. They know all this stuff. They're happy to check line of sight or make measurements or give rulings. They did get a little bit tired of how often we were using them at one point in the team event. They were like, guys, you do need to look up your own rules, right? You have the app. You have a 4-hour round. You can look up how I don't remember what it was that we were asking about. But you can look up how that works. But it was fantastic to get to have all that access to live judging, and there was active judging in a lot of the later rounds of events. Big thumbs up for that. Lim and Mohawk, Jay, and the rest of the judging team, y'all did fantastic. We really appreciate you guys being there. They are the absolute MVPs of the event. It was handled fantastically. Cool. Anything else about review, guys, you want to mention before we jump into the main event?
Not at all. The first thing I want to talk about in terms of the actual event is terrain. Just because I feel
absolutely, yeah. We need to talk about that for sure. WTC terrain. Do you want me to pull up one of these visuals here to talk about how?
Pull up the
how
slides and go to the very first one.
Yeah, for sure. Here you go. Here's an example. One of the really cool things about the WTC is that all of the terrain is fixed, always has been, as far as I know, always will be, and it's fixed in a way that is varied between rounds. So every mission on every deployment zone layout has a number of preset layouts to choose from. In War Masters, everyone was playing on the same layout at the same time, but they were, a varied mix. In teams, not so much. Lucas, you want to take it from there?
Sure. So, the WTC tables needed a little bit of adaptation this year to adjust from 9th edition to 10th edition. And this is kind of a example table, not necessarily, completely representative of all the tables that were there, but this kind of gets to the gist of it. There are 3 table types in each round. You've got light tables, medium tables, and heavy tables. In total, on all of those types, you're going to have 10 pieces of terrain on each board. And by piece of terrain, I mean the 6x12, rectangle that, or I don't know if it's exactly 6x12, but the rectangle that is kind of reminiscent of like the GW style brick that you put a ruin on top of. So you can see those here. They're the blue and the kind of pink rectangular pieces, and the WTC Ls rest on top of those guys. There's 10 of them on every single table. The blue rectangles and the pink rectangles are a little bit different. The blue ones have a 3-story tall ruin on them, and that ruin has no windows at all. So those black ruins that you see, they are 3 stories tall and they have no windows. So you can run up against the wall. You don't have to be worried about being seen, except if someone comes around the other side of the wall. The pink ones, by contrast, have a 2-story ruin on them. No windows on the first floor. Yes, windows on the second floor. So these are buildings that you can tuck some infantry into with a lot of safety. You can hide like a short vehicle or like a character, something like that, up against the wall itself and not really be seen. But as soon as your model is tall and you touch the terrain, you can be seen. If someone has a towering model, they can see over those pieces of terrain with relative ease. So the reason the distinction was made this year was because of the towering keyword. They haven't said this, but I think it's fairly obvious that the terrain needed to change a little bit, and that the blue pieces are relatively towering, unfriendly, and then the other pieces you can still hide from towering if you tuck in all the way at the bottom. But if you have a vehicle or a tall model, something like that, then towering can still see over those. So there's a little bit of checks and balances there. So every table has 10 pieces of terrain on it. The light I should say, it's an 8v8 at the start of the round, right? So there's going to be 8 tables that the players are playing on in each round, and all of them have fixed terrain, like Tyler mentioned. So between the 8 fixed tables, there are going to be 2 light tables, 4 medium tables, and 2 heavy tables. The light tables have one of the blue 3-story completely obscuring pieces. The medium have 2, like the example here, and the heavy have 3. So if you could go forward just one slide, please, Tyler. One more. Oh, never mind. These are the 2 are light. So you can see here, these light tables have one solid ruin, and then all the other ones are those 2-story tall ones where the bottom floor is blocking and the second floor is not.
By one, you mean one per side, so two of the 10 in total.
Right, yeah. 2 of the 10 in total have are the 3-story tall guys. So back up to the first slide, please. This is the corners table that I played against Germany on, for example. I played against GSC on this table. And the table choice, for those who have not played teams or have not played much teams, table choice is very, very important. You know, we talk a lot about what makes a good defender, what makes a good attacker in terms of the team's process. A lot of that comes down to what kind of table you want to pick. So very often teams will decide who they want to attack or defend with based on who needs what table picks and whose matrix gets better based on if they have table choice, that kind of thing. There's also in previous years they had the rectangles that represented like a forest and the grates as well. Those have been completely done away with. We do still have crates on some, but not all of the tables. So for example, here we can see that there are some crates near the middle of the table. Those are two crates worth tall. So they're basically 5 inches tall. And they're maybe like 2 inches wide, 4 inches long, something like that. But not all tables had them.
Yeah, a couple of interesting notes here. You'll notice that table by table, there is not necessarily a super consistent schema applied in terms of how objectives are going to work. On some tables, like this table you're looking at right here, center objectives are holdable, 1 per player behind a wall. You can see here this bottom right and top left objective. They kind of poke out behind the wall there, and same thing on this first slide here. Those objectives are holdable pretty darn safely behind those walls. But on this third table over here, which is labeled as a light table, you can see, though the base of the terrain does go over the midfield objectives, the actual L itself is completely behind them. So on this table, there is no way to hold a midfield objective while being behind a wall, other than kind of like clustering up against the edge of that obscuring, and then it's not a very hard angle at all to cut to see you. So when people are deciding on tables, generally there are 2 things that they're considering. Number 1, is it light, medium, heavy, i.e. how many solid L's are there? Where are those solid L's relative to the rest of the L's? And then most importantly, which objectives are holdable behind walls or not? If you are playing a Wraith Knight, you probably want none of them to be holdable behind walls. If you are playing into a Wraith Knight, you probably want all of them to be holdable behind walls.
And I'm pretty sure every single terrain map had the middle objective in the open.
Yes, there is not a single map in which a singular center objective can be held from behind a wall. There were some maps, including one that we played in War Masters on round 1, I think, where the center objective split, and that meant that both of them were holdable from behind walls. That was a real crazy mission, but we didn't do anything that wild at WTC. If you look through the pack...
Round 3.
Oh,
Middle.
into the
Split.
Danes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. If you look into the WTC pack, into War Masters, and into the regular War Masters, again is the name of the singles event, they kind of put all the wacky missions in War Masters and said, go nuts. And then in teams, especially toward the end of the team's event, we're playing very straightforward, good and proper missions that shouldn't overly advantage one individual over the other. We're not playing servo skulls or anything that can be a little less technical. But yeah, what did you guys think of the WTC terrain, having now played a whole bunch of games on it, both in practice and at the actual event?
I really like it. It's a lot of fun. Every game feels varied. Maybe, if I played 200 games on this, I'd start to be like, oh, this is this table. I've seen this now. I'm getting bored of it. But every game felt unique. Every game felt different. Which table you end up on really changes the matchup, which I'll talk about a little bit later when I go into my Pumbaa game versus my Vic game. 2 games against basically the same army, both on light tables, and very different outcomes based on the table. So they have massive implications on the game, and it's really fun to kind of dissect that and unpack it a little bit as your team does pairings. They're also just really fun to play on. They're very dense, so it is not it is very difficult to be shot in your deployment zone unless your opponent has towering, essentially, or indirect. Those are the only ways which you're going to be shot in your deployment zone. Even my army, which has a gigantic footprint, was fairly easily able to hide in my deployment zone with, like, not a lot of issue. I didn't have to deploy super defensively. So really dense, really fun, very interactive. It creates like a lot of different, like, there's all sorts of like micro engagements all across the board, each of which has like a different complexion and work a little bit differently, which is really fun. And yeah, it's just really fun to play. A lot of I'll leave it at that. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah. After playing on this for like a lot, and after playing it like the GW Open, I could not imagine going back to player place terrain. I'm very, very happy that we have convinced our local TOs to switch to a fixed terrain format. Now they are playing GW Open, but I heard that like the WTC terrain this year, obviously it's on these giant plates, very similar to how the GW Open terrain is on their giant plates, because that's just kind of what you need for terrain to work in this edition, with like bases having to be wholly within to get cover and shoot, etc. So it was nice seeing like how similar the two formats are, and obviously WTC does have a lot more tables. They have 8 tables for every mission. I know some of the missions are shared. But like based off of mission and like deployment type, yeah, that's when the terrain changes. So I really like it. There's definitely a lot of thought that went into them, and I mean I applaud them being able to create like these just very unique. Like every table feels pretty different, so I applaud them being able to do that in such a short time. So
Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. It's the best format of terrain that I've played on 10th edition. It's not close. Something that's not shown here, but that I think is a really funny feature that shows up in some of these boards is what I've been calling the Super Ls, which is an L made of Ls. You basically take 2 of these WTC Ls and slam them together at a right angle, and it's very funny because you end up with this like weird little pocket between 2 of the L's where it's like a U shape at the corner, and that little pocket is a very safe place to hide things, which leads to some really interesting gameplay outcomes. But yeah, they're varied, they're different things favor different armies and different play styles. Really great stuff. A+ to the guys on WTC terrain. Cool. We ready to jump into into round 1? Only an hour and 10 minutes into the show. Fantastic. All right, so round 1, as the boys is mentioned earlier, we, as the number 1 seed in our pod, got to play into the number 4 seed, which was our boys from Cyprus. Cyprus was one of the newcomer teams to WTC this year, which was really exciting. Always great to have new teams. As to the best of my knowledge, all 8 members of their team were actually from Cyprus. No Mercs on this team at all, which is super cool for such a tiny country. I think that country has a smaller population than Seattle, if memory serves. So real great to see them. They were a great bunch of dudes. Something else you'll notice as a recurrent theme is that basically everyone at WTC is a great bunch of dudes. But Cyprus was certainly no exception to that. Loved those guys. Yeah, they were out here doing their thing. Does one of y'all have the Cyprus roster quick to hand to read off, to hear about what they were taking? Sweet.
Got it.
Yeah, what do they got, Lucas?
Cyprus had Ultramarines, Imperial Knights, Drukari, Gene Stealer Cults, Custodians, Sororitas, Thousand Suns, and Eldar on the roster. Very
cool. And I think the format's going to be, we'll read off the roster, we'll talk about what you personally played into, what your expectation was, how the game went, what the result was, and then we'll just read off the rest of the pairings and the rest of the results to cover sort of the full round at a much higher level. So what did we put you into round 1, Lucas, of this Cyprus team?
Yeah, so I forget exactly what part of the pairings process I got mashed into GSC, but I did get to play against Cyprus's GSC, which was a lot of fun. This was on Hammer and Anvil, and the mission rule was the primary was the objectives slowly disappear. So on turn 4, one of them disappears. On turn 5, the next one disappears. The way it worked on our table was the left objective disappeared on turn 4, then the right objective on turn 5, and the middle objective was remaining at the end of the game. Cyprus's GSC was pretty standard. They had, I think, 1 or 2 Ridge Runners. They had 10 Aberrants. They had 60 Neophytes and like 3 Bomb Squads, something like that. Fairly standard stuff. For the rest of the pairings for the round, let me pull it up really quickly.
We'll cover those at the end. We want to cover the whole round at once. Talk about this GSC game, Lucas.
Look, talk about the game. Sure. So, pretty interesting game. There's a lot of pregame decisions that go into what influences the tempo of the Orcs GSC matchup. First of all, the GSC players to decide what they want to do with their Aberrants. If they want to deploy them aggressively or defensively, and then B, once deployment is finished, if they want to bring them into reserves or not. My opponent this round did what no one else has ever done against me and put them into reserve pregame. So he had essentially nothing on the board at the start of the game, which meant that if he went second, he was about to have a really bad time. But he did end up going first, which meant he got to get the drop on me before much else happened. So I responded by kind of pushing up a little bit. My normal approach is to basically 3-inch screen the entirety of my deployment zone, put a couple trucks forward to force him to make a move. Those trucks ended up on the objectives, and then just kind of stage the rest of my army up. The way these tables work, this isn't the this what's on screen right now is not the table that I played on, obviously, because it's not Hammer and Anvil. But the way they work, just bring it up again for a second. I'm sorry, Tyler. The way they work is there's a lot of the angles between the pieces of terrain are very, very shallow if you position correctly. So with the relatively short range of the GSC army, it can actually be very easy to stage trucks in different places so that, getting a bomb squad on multiple trucks is very difficult. And if you do, then you're going to put yourself in easy charge range. I mean, the bomb squads are 6-inch range anyway, so you're going to get in charge range regardless. But to both be in a position to bomb multiple trucks and then to have Neophyte shoot at the contents, that is what I want to avoid, and that is actually fairly easy on these terrain setups, just with the density of the things that are on the board here. So I was able to do that, set up for his drop turn very defensively. He ends up coming in, cracking like 2 or 3 trucks and killing 10 guys, and then from that point, he did not screen his Neophytes very appropriately, so I was able to stay in combat with them for the most of the game. He did have some cool plays where he heroic intervention his Aberrants a couple times to kind of get some extra primary points and stay in the game and not get completely blown out. But with his Neophytes in combat, basically from turn 2 onward, he ran out of ability to actually kill my stuff, and I had most of my army still alive at the end of the game, which was not a good sign for GSC. So I think I end up taking this game pretty comfortably. Let me get you the actual round score. Going second, it is a bummer for the fairly obvious statement here of the century. Going second is a bit of a bummer in terms of like tempo advantage, but at the end of the game, the primary swings I was able to get were just so impactful that it probably overall impacted my score more positively than negatively. So against Leo Capiri's GSC Colts, I ended up getting 16 points to his 4. So great game overall. It was a lot of fun.
Very cool. As a reminder, before I read off the rest of these scores, this is Cyprus's first year. None of their members have been at the WTC before, obviously. So they're mostly here to earn a bunch of new skills, network a bunch of new people, and be ready to level up a lot before next year. But some of these games are a little one-sided. John Lennon on Custodes played into their Marines player 20-0. Jaime on Deathwatch played into their Sisters player 20-0. Matt Schuckman played on Eldar played into their Drukari player 20-0. Eric Forsman, our GSC player, played into their T-Sons 18-2. Lucas got a 16-4. Vanilla on his CSM 20-0'd their Eldar, which was the funny moment of the weekend. He definitely did not think that was, or of the round at least, he did not think that was going to be a very good matchup because it's generally not. But the Eldar player got a little bit over-aggressive, I think, left himself a little vulnerable, and Chaos Space Marines did what Chaos Space Marines do best, and shot like the Dickens. My gosh. And yeah, once you actually beat Eldar in the damage fight, they have no scoring. That's not real, so they're gonna have a bad time, especially on Hammer and Anvil. It was a good mission to take advantage of that. And then Sean Naden on his Tyranids played into their Custodes, 20-0. And then Jack Harpster, our lowest scorer of the round, got a 14-6 into Imperial Knights, which was very funny because 14-6 into Knights is usually a very impressive result. Cool. So we wrap up round 1, 148-12 into Cyprus. Had a great time with those guys. Got a whole bunch of points, which positioned us immediately at the very top, which felt real good.
Yep.
Cool beans. Let's move on down to round 2. Who are we playing in round 2, Nick?
We are playing against Northern Ireland.
Tell us a little bit about the Northern Irish.
I mean, they're a cool group of guys. Their captain is definitely one of the more well-known members at WTC. His name is Cattle. He's a very friendly man. He will come up behind you and slap you on the rear end to greet you, even if you've never met him before. But no, he's really funny, and everyone like knows that he's really goofy. But also, he's someone that like I had like a few just like real nice like long genuine conversations with over the weekend, and it was an absolute blast getting to meet him and getting to like meet a lot of members on their team.
Yeah, the dude is an absolute gem. Man's is an actual leprechaun running around. He's like 5'1", bald, old with a giant orange beard, and just laughs like a maniac constantly. Absolutely love this dude.
I did first meet him at the there's like a social night the night before teams, which is usually at the one local bar that is open past 11 o'clock. And we were hanging out, and I come out of the bar with a drink at like, I don't know, midnight or something. And he sees the straws that the bartender put in my drink that are red, white, and blue. And he's like, oh, get that red, white, blue shit out of here. Grabs the straws and just throws them away somewhere. And I'm like, all right, nice to meet you, sir. So, yeah.
Yeah, these guys are great. They're a lot of fun to play against.
Yeah, we had played a TTS scrim against Northern Irish not too long ago. And we knew they were going to be a great time. Absolutely were. So, who do we manage to pair you into this time, Lucas?
I played against Mark Morrow's Necrons.
Awesome. So 2 for 2 on matchups we were trying to get you into. How'd this one go?
Went pretty well. The Necron list is Transcendent Catan with the Weave. He's got 2 bricks of Lich Guard. He's got a Reanimator. He's got some Destroyers. He's got 3 Locust Destroyers with the Anti-Infantry Gun, which is definitely spooky. But yeah, fairly bog standard. 2 DDAs, I'm pretty sure. And yeah. This game was interesting. We played on the Ritual, and was it Sweeping Engagement? Yes. Crucible of Battle?
I thought it was the other one.
I thought it was Search and Destroy.
No, it's definitely not Corners.
I think it was Quarters, right?
It was not Corners.
It was the Ritual, Chilling Reign, Crucible of Battle. Corners, not Quarters. The deployment zone formerly known as Bomber Mission.
Yeah, used to be Bomber. Can't believe it's not Hammer and Anvil.
Yeah. Whatever you want to call it.
So yeah, this was another game that went very well and was a lot of fun. My opponent, I forgot to mention in round 1, I went fix every single game. I always took Homer, and then against GSC, I always took Assassinate. Against Necrons, I always took Cleanse. And against Thousand Suns, I took either Assassinate or Cleanse, depending on how much trolling I wanted to do. So yeah, this game I took Cleanse and Homer, and he took Tactical. My round 1 opponent also took Tactical. And yeah, unfortunately went second this round, and was in for an initial scare when my opponent rolled a 6 to go first, rolled a 5 for his first Lich Guard advance, rolled a 6 for his second Lich Guard advance, and I'm like, oh, well, that's a bit of a bummer. Guess I have to answer this problem immediately. But the good news is the Lich Guard are pretty one-dimensional. Even if they roll a high advance on turn 1, pretty easy to take objective back from them, and then also prevent them from charging anything meaningful in the second turn. So didn't end up logging on turn 1, just kind of blunted his offensive on turn 1, prevented him from doing a bunch of movement, got my secondary points, and then as soon as turn 2 rolled around, I enacted the game plan, charged his vehicles and destroyers with my boys, charged his Lich Guard with my trucks, and then within Mythic Disintegrator or Heavy Locust squad, it's much easier for them to actually just shoot their way through all of the orcs. And his strength ended up in my backfield pretty early, but I was able to just get enough of a points lead on turn 2 and 3 that even with his late game pushes, he wasn't really able to make too much happen in terms of a comeback. So it did end up at a 10-10. Ideally would have shot for a couple more points. I had this down as, I think I had this down as a, no, I didn't have this as a green in the Matrix. I was very sketched of the Mythic Disintegrator Heavy Locust squad. But probably could have pushed for a couple more points. There were some big swings, especially going second and my opponent rolling so well to get close to me on turn 1. That really sketched me out and probably kept the game closer than it otherwise would have been. But definitely well played. My opponent knew all the things he needed to do and understood the complexion of the game just basically right from the start. As soon as turn 2 rolled around and I charged him, he's like, oh, this is what's going to happen for the rest of the game. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. And then we just, we watched that all pan out. It was very rewarding. So yeah, good game to mark. It was a lot of fun. And I think I was one of the closer games of that round.
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to your 10-10, we did take our first loss of the event that round, which is that Jaime on Deathwatch lost to their Eldar 11-9. Very impressive going into Eldar to pull out 9 points. And then the rest were wins. Lenin's Custodes beat their Space Marines 14-6. Eric's GSC beat their Custodes 17-3. Vanilla's CSM beat their Demons 20-0. Jack's Grey Knights beat their T-Sons 12-8. Shuckman's Eldar beat their Chaos Knights 19-1. And Naden beat their GSC 20-0. So as you can see, both of our techie anti-GSC lists going right to work and doing the thing. Very excited to see that in practice. That was sort of what we bet a lot of the team comp around. So seeing that and actually do the thing felt real good, especially on this was day 2. It was evening of day 1 was round 1, and then it was round 2, round 3 on day 2, round 4, round 5 on day 3, and round 6, round 7 on day 4. Very cool. Great. So the U.S. ends up pulling out 121-39 into Northern Ireland, maintaining our position on top. Great round, boys. Was a real good time.
Yep.
At this point, Nick, you want to take a sec to pause and interject here about some of what we were up to as coaches while all this is going on? Lucas is playing Warhammer. What's oh wait, you were not here on day, but you were here on other days. What's the coaching experience like?
Yeah, I mean the coaching experience is super fun. We have a lot of teams have at least one coach. Some teams have 2. We basically had a large roster of players and non-players, and all of the non-players were invited to come help coach in an effort to like make it so that we weren't just all like, getting our wires crossed and stuff. We basically had like 2 main coaches. That was Stephen Corrales and Quentin Johnson. So they were in charge of like, they had the clipboards, which basically like with our predictions written down. And they were kind of going around and double checking with players like at certain intervals, like, hey, does this look right? And if not, like they would, adjust negatively or positively based off of that. And then they would like relay the information to Sean, who would then tell people how to adjust their play if needed to like guarantee us, winning that round. For us, most of the time was basically just walking around, making sure everyone was taken care of. There's a lot of stuff that can like distract you during a 40K game, right? Like needing to like go get something, especially like in that event hall. Water was a big one. So we always made sure that people had water. Or because like there are 8 players and there are only 1 Steven and 1 Quentin, sometimes a player would need to get information to someone quickly and they would like call one of us over to relay that information to someone else. So yeah, it was just mostly a lot of like quiet observation and just being there for people when they needed you.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of our players were a little bit more communicative than others. So it was very often our role as coaches to be reading game states and relaying what's going on to the central HQ people who may not necessarily know what a GSC Orcs game is supposed to look like, for example, while letting Lucas focus on, dominating instead of having to worry about score reporting so much, or especially our GSC and NIDS players were doing their best.
Yeah. One of the big things about WTC is that if you go up to a table and you ask a player something, or like you tell a player something, one, you aren't allowed to communicate any advice or any like tactical play, anything that could really like mess with like anything that can like, hey, you should do that. Like you can't do that at all. But like you are allowed to ask them like, how does this like, does your score look like correct? Right. And if they say, I think I'm going to get a 16, right? Okay, good to know. However, if you say anything to a player at a table, if they say anything to you, the other person at the table, their opponent, has to be able to hear what you're saying. So sometimes it's a bit of a disadvantage, like what Tyler was saying, to go up and ask Lucas, like, how do you think this game's going? And the GSC player might be like, all right, I think I have this orc player like on lock, right? And if Lucas turns to Tyler and goes, yeah, I think I'm going to get a 16, all of a sudden the GSC player pauses and goes, wait, what? And they might adjust their play because they didn't realize that they're about to walk into a trap. So it can be a lot better sometimes to just like look at the table, be like, okay, looks like it's going good, and then report that to the coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. Was a ton of fun to be a coach involved, and yeah, we had like a full 8 coaches, and I very rarely found myself feeling like there was nothing to do. There were the more people you have, the more responsibilities you can pawn off to them, and a lot of teams were commenting on how jealous they were of like, oh man, you guys needed someone to get water for 3 of your team members. When we did that, we lost half our coaching staff. When you guys did that, you just sent a guy over. It was great. So that was a lot of fun and a real advantage of the American strength in numbers. But yeah, sweet. Moving on down to round 3 then. This is going to be our final round in the pod, and this should be the hardest. Round 3, we are playing into Denmark, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Absolutely. So the Danes, they actually put up a pretty solid showing this year. They had a very respectable team. And in the pairings process, as things were looking okay, but certainly not nearly as good as they had been in the last couple rounds. So who did you end up paired into in round 3, Lucas?
I ended up playing against Andy Horvath's Necrons.
More Necrons. Sweet. What's different about this Necrons compared to the ones you just played into?
No Enmitic Disintegrator squad. He had 3 squads of 2 heavy locusts with the big anti-tank gun. So a lot less anti-infantry, but a lot more anti-tank. I had to be very careful this game of not getting my trucks killed in a big hurry. So, pretty interesting game. I forget exactly what table we played on, but this was the Purge the Foe, Sweeping Engagement, and Chilling. No, this was the one where the middle objective split into 2 and moved toward the
Hidden
corners.
supplies, yeah.
So there were 4 midfield objectives, and the primary was hold 1, hold more, kill 1, kill more, 8th edition ITC style. So definitely an interesting game, and one that orcs don't really want to play Necrons on because of the nature of their primary. They can get a lot of points just from kind of killing your army passively, which they do anyway. This was a pretty interesting game. Unfortunately, I went second again for the 3rd time in a row. Army ability got worse. Thanks, GW, for that one. The Andy did not roll as well as Mark on getting his Lich Guard onto the objectives. So he only ended up on 1 midfield objective, which given the nature of the primary didn't really matter all that much. But I took my usual approach, just spent 1 turn of basically doing nothing and getting all my points using as few resources as possible. He continued to push forward. When I kind of staged my army forward, I made sure I left him a couple of avenues to shoot me if he pushed forward. Which was fine. He pushed forward, he shot me, he popped a couple of trucks, and then I wad and just slammed him with all the remaining trucks, got into combat, and then, charged all of his Locust Destroyers, made sure they were in combat, charged the DDAs. I think I actually killed both of them that turn, which was pretty cool. Took both those guys out, and then from there, Andy had a hard time actually getting back into the game. He ended up getting a lot of points out of kill 1 and kill more, but on that turn 2, actually, one of the funniest stories from the event anyway for me was getting kill more against Necrons on that turn 2. I ended up killing like 5 or 6 units or something stupid. So I ended up getting kill more against one of the toughest armies in the game with one of the most trash armies in the game, which was really funny.
Let's go!
Yeah, it was really cool. But pretty cool game overall. And again, one where by the end of the game, he's basically hacked through my entire army. And I have killed more or less all of his stuff except for the Lich Guard and the Transcendent Catan. But because of the lack of his ability to get on the objectives early and the hold more points I was getting in addition to the kill points I was denying on a couple of good turns, I ended up getting a few more points out of this round than I did last round. Ended up defeating Andy 13-7. So a very good game and kind of further cementing our idea that orcs have a very stable, if not good, matchup into Necrons.
Yeah.
As a coach, this one was super exciting to watch because I remember we practiced this exact matchup, like this Necrons list in this mission, and I think you actually got the same table that we randomly picked.
Yes.
So
We have
when
the
I saw
same
that
table,
happen,
the correct mission, and we played against Denmark's Necrons at Sean's house.
yeah, and we'd gone through that matchup a few times, like you going first, him going first, and when we both saw that happen, I'm like, let's go, dude. So it was sick seeing you execute.
Thanks.
Very hype. Yeah, one of the really fun things about prepping for this, especially at practice weekend, is that we already knew what our pods were, and because of the way the pods work, you know what round you're playing what pod member. So it's not a coincidence that they were practicing this Necron list on this mission. The map is funny, but like we got to know, hey, if I'm going to play against that particular wonky list, I know what round I'll play them in. Less so with some of the seeded play afterwards. That was kind of a shot in the dark, which admittedly are the more important ones generally, but it was very cool to get to see situations that we had practiced happen exactly as we had practiced them. Last round, Sean and I had been practicing that exact layout with that exact GSC list, I think, as well. But I don't remember if it was the same table. Anyway, rest of the round there, we paired Sean into their Death Watch, and Sean continues to do Sean things in 20-0s. Harpster played into their Custodes with his Grey Knights and 10-10. Like we said, Lucas 13-7's the Necrons. Our GSC loses to the Eldar 11-9. Respectable. This was kind of the big storyline of the round. Jaime Paris on Death Watch ended up losing to their Thousand Sons 12-8, which, mad respect for pulling a 12-8 out of that, because that round looked sketchy as hell. Jaime had this down in his matrix as, oh yeah, this is a great matchup for me. I absolutely love this. I'm going to kick their butts. You know, my indirect fire is super oppressive and this, that, and the other thing. I don't think we had really played into a lot of the Euro-style T-Suns lists, but we ended up being super wrong about that assessment. I mean, don't put this on Jaime. Like, I think Lennon thought it was a great matchup as well. And then Jaime went second, and turn one, this dude, like, Dark Matter Crystal, or whatever they call the crystal now, and then double moved a squad of Rubrics, and suddenly just, like, obliterated a squad of Jaimes that he thought was super safe. And he was like, oh, no. Oh, this is bad. This is real bad, guys. This is terrible. Ends up clawing it back, doing some crazy Jaime nonsense. Jaime is so good at Warhammer, dude. Ends up killing Magnus with like 2 infiltrators between a grenade strat and a clutch charge and some rerolls, and was super cool. We're like, okay, Jaime, great job stabilizing, but Jesus Christ, that was terrifying. Jaime's score reporting has to be the scariest. Like, I joke about how Eric and Sean's is basically non-existent, but Jaime would be like, all right, guys, I'm getting a 15. And we're like, awesome, Jaime, you do that. And then we'd come back 10 minutes later, and he'd be like, guys, I'm getting a 5. I'm getting wrecked. And we're like, oh, no. Oh, gosh. Okay. Thanks, Jaime. We'll figure it out. And then you come back an hour later, he's like, guys, we're doing great. We're getting an 18. And we're like, what is going on, Jaime? Man plays very swingy games, and definitely was emotionally invested in the outcomes, but always managed to pull out some decent numbers for us. Ends up getting an 8 into 12 on this, and that sort of sets the tone for how we're going to try to pair him around this when we thought this was something we could pair into. Continuing down the line, in case you forgot, Lennon's Custodes 20-0's Chaos Space Marines, Shuckman's Eldar 16-4's their GSC. Shuckman and Forceman are good friends, and they had practiced a bunch, so that was a matchup that he knew very well, and their particular GSC list was not it. I think this was the double Aberrance list.
Yep.
It's not what you want to Eldar. And then Vanilla's CSM's 19-1 some poor Imperial Knights with a Castellan, despite a Forge Fiend killing itself on Overwatch.
Well, I didn't hear about that.
Because he pacts, and all 3 of them have hazardous checks that do 3 mortal wounds, and he took straight up 9 wounds between those 4 things.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was very funny. But it was very cool. Great round to the Danes. We ended up winning 115-45. When Jaime told us he was getting wrecked, and a couple of these were marked as being very drawish, like we thought Naden was getting like a 10 or an 11. We thought John was getting like a 12 or a 13, and we thought Matt was getting like an 11 or a 12, and Anthony was getting like a 14 or a 15. And then Jaime is like, oh, it's getting terrible. And we're like, oh God, are we about to lose? This is about to go terribly. And then the rest of the boys just picked up the slack and bonked the Danes on the head. Love the Vikings, but unfortunately they weren't able to pull it out this time. USA wins 115-45, which means we exit the pod stage comfortably in first place. having just milked a lot of points out of the pods. Some people will say it's because our pod was a little bit on the softer side. Some people will know that it's because America is the greatest country in the history of Warhammer. So naturally we'd be in first place. What else would happen? Sweet. So at the end of that, we do move into Swiss pairings, and we go home to start prepping for the next morning. Because again, it was round 1 in the evening, round 2 in the morning, round 3 in the evening, and then round 4 in the morning. And our next round is into the Germans. You want to tell us a little bit about Germany and their role in the greater WTC meta, Nick?
Yeah, and from what I understand, basically for the longest time in ETC, Germany and Poland were always seen as like the two best teams. Like if you were planning on winning ETC, you had to beat both Germany and Poland at some point. So they have a very long history of doing very well at this event.
Yeah, absolutely. They're scary. They're well practiced. They unfortunately did have a medical emergency. Their Chaos Knights player, who I think was he their captain? I don't think he was. No, the captain stepped in because the Chaos Knights player. Was he the one with chickenpox?
No, that was Scotland, I think.
Okay. Oh yeah,
There's a bunch of
was he the one with appendicitis? I don't remember.
There's someone who got appendicitis. I don't know if it was this guy, but yeah, very unfortunate.
Anyway, their Chaos Knights player had to be shipped off due to medical emergency, which was terrifying. But my understanding is that he was largely okay. But whatever the case may be, they had their captain, who was a non-player, step in and cover their Chaos Knights. So that matchup got a little bit easier without their top player on them. But overall, we're very scared. Germany's a very respectable country, bringing some solid lists. Lucas, who did we pair you into this time, into Germans?
All right, round 4. So far I played against GSC Necrons, and this round I get GSC again. I think this happened kind of later on. I think we were the refused, so we happened relatively later on in the scrum.
Oh, sorry. I think our refused was GSC, right? Our final one.
Oh, yeah.
Because I remember it being really scary. We put down our refuse, and the guy's like, we already know it's GSC.
We already know it's
GSC.
All like, yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
He predicted it, dude. Yeah,
I don't know where it was in the... I think I was in the scrum, though.
I think you're in the scrum, yeah.
Okay, I don't really remember. But either way, I'm playing against Florian Schmidt's Genestealer Cults. Fairly standard list. It's got 1 Ridge Runner... It's got 10 Aberrants. It's got 1, 2, 3.5. So 35 Bombas. It's got 60 Acolytes and 1 Ridge Runner. Yeah. So pretty standard stuff for a European list. 30 Acolytes, 60 Neophytes, 10 Aberrants. We are playing on corners. This was the mission that we were talking about the terrain for. So it was on screen a little while ago. Here it is. Florian deploys his Aberrants right in the middle of the table, kind of right on the middle objective. Anticipating this, I kind of put a couple trucks forward as bait. Flo ends up going first and just running his guys forward and smashing the hell out of 2 trucks. And then kind of a staple approach for my Orcs list to deal with this kind of aggression from the Aberrants, especially going second, is you just lock them down. You spend 1 crap unit to just base a bunch of models, and then you use 1 truck or better a track because they're toughness 9 to get in combat with just 1 aberrant model, so that 1 aberrant model doesn't kill the truck back, and then the aberrants are in combat for the whole turn because they cannot fall back and charge. So you just kind of lock them there. The aberrants basically spent the entirety of the game. So if I'm in the lower left quadrant, they kind of moved through that big solid blue base L that's right outside my deployment zone. They charged through that onto 2 trucks, flattened those, and then they spent the rest of the game just right in combat there in that open space right in front of my objective. While the rest of my army kind of circumnavigated them, aggressed onto the 2 objectives on the top left and bottom right, and just made sure that Flo never got any primary for standing on those. So if I recall correctly, this was the burning objectives mission. So corners, scorched earth, chilling rain. So Flo got a bunch of points for standing on his top right objective and then basically never got any points ever again. Other than that, he also took tactical, which I think was a big mistake. But the tactical deck was not super kind to him, and then he ended up not getting as many points as he was really hoping for. So with some end of game primary swings and just general better objective control than the GSC have, I ended up pulling out this game 14-6. It's also very helpful to just lock down those aberrants for the whole game, because that's more or less 400 points that spent the entire game in combat with trash, not on any objectives, while the rest of my army went around and scored all the points. So it's very good for Orcs to be able to take a very solid fixed secondary into GSE. Between my 3 games that I played against GSE, I got more or less max secondary every single round. I got 20 on Assassinate every single time. And then I think in this round, I got like 17 on homers. And then the other 2 games, I got 18 on homers. So very easy for Orcs to get like 38 points plus on secondaries. And because they have better primary control than the GSC, it is difficult for GSC to crack a tie, get any better than a 10-10 against Orcs. So definitely a good game. I could tell Flo was not anticipating the trucks being as much of a problem as they were, but it was very difficult for him to both crack the cars and then also kill the guys inside. It was a fun game. Ends up 14-6.
Hell yeah, dude. And we needed every one of those points.
Yes.
We are done smashing people. Every team we play against after now is a fantastic team and is terrifying.
If I recall correctly, I'll let you read off the scores here in a second, but everyone else's game was in, and it was looking tight as I finished up my game.
Yeah, so Naden goes into their custodes. Once again, Naden nonsense pulls out a 17-3. Love that. Jaime got bust. And we say got bust, we mean was paired into something we knew was terrible so as to improve the pairings of everybody else. In particular, he got paired directly into Thousand Suns, which is the thing that, as I said last round, we discovered that he really cannot play into. And he also happened to go into Arna, who is probably their best player. Apologies if there's someone else that I'm forgetting about. But he's a fantastic Thousand Suns player. He beat me at War Masters playing Chaos Knights, which isn't even his army. And he is terrifying. And Jaime was like, "It's over, dudes. I'm getting wrecked. I'm getting wrecked. I'm getting wrecked." The whole freaking game. Dude thought he was getting a 0, managed to pull out a 4, which was huge. And I think this is one of those stories that like really epitomizes how cool teams can be. Because, spoiler alert, Jaime getting that 4 is what is necessary to the result of this round. Things would have gone much worse if he had not made that happen. So him fighting tooth and nail for what is it? What's the Space Wolf box called? Tooth and claw. Tooth and claw for every single point there. Completely essential. Even though he's getting crushed, he is still part of why we're winning. Eric Forsman on our GSC goes into their not Chaos Knight player, their captain playing Chaos Knights, ends up in a 10-10. That's a hard matchup for GSC. So nice job by Eric there. Lucas, like we said, pulls a 14-6 into their GSC with his Orcs. Lennon's Custodes runs into their Death Watch, and that's also a 10-10. Jack runs his Grey Knights into their Necrons for a 13-7, which was great. Anthony runs his CSM into their Demons. Last time he played Demons, it was a 20-0. I think he just tried to rinse and repeat and ended up getting caught a little bit off guard by some not great dice and maybe a little bit different strategy. Ends up losing 8-12. And Shuckman's Eldar plays into their Eldar mirror for a mirror match of a 10-10 draw. That game was so boring. You could not pay me to watch that. But what that means for those who don't have calculators for brains is we end up winning this 86-74. Whew. Some we haven't mentioned yet. 85-75 or a smaller overall differential is a draw.
So we were one differential point away from a draw.
Yeah, if Lucas gets a 13-7 instead of a 14-6, if Jaime gets a 3-17 instead of a 4-16, if Naden gets a 16-4 into Custode instead of 17-3, draw. We needed everyone on all cylinders to pull that off. It was wicked tight, and yeah, Lucas was the last round playing, and we were like, "Dude, we need a 14," and he was like, "All right."
Say less, boys.
These rounds being 4 hours is real nice, and a lot of people, like John Lennon, for example, playing Custodes, that army takes 30 minutes to play. So he would very often play his first turn or two, and then be like, all right, well now we're at a sort of a a split in the pads where either I can go real hard and try to win this game, or I can stay pretty passive and just sort of draw this game. But we don't know what's going on with the rest of the team yet, so we don't know what we need to do. So he would literally just put the clock on himself and like go get a soda and go to the bathroom and just like walk around for half an hour and burn his own clock to get more information about how the rest of the games are going and make decisions. Real cool. Lucas has no such luxury. Lucas played 4 hours of Warhammer basically every single round. Shit looks exhausting.
It was.
Yeah, I know this game came down to like the very last couple minutes. So great freaking job by Lucas, and great job for the US of A. Felt fantastic. Finishing round 4 undefeated. At the end of round 4, there are only 2 undefeated teams left in the tournament, which are us and Poland. Everyone else has at least a draw. The Aussies got a draw, which was somewhat unexpected. England got a draw, which was somewhat unexpected. France got a draw, so it was like, oh man, looking good. Like, it's basically just us in the polls. And going into round 5, this isn't the end of the day, because this is the middle of the day. If we can beat Poland, the last undefeated team at the end of this here, we're looking good to take the whole thing. As you may know from the results of the event, not exactly what ends up happening, but we were riding pretty damn high at this point. How did you guys feel having finished up round 4, just squeaking by with that 4-0?
I mean, I was definitely heart was definitely pounding at the end of that round. That was, you know, I didn't really fully appreciate it while I was playing, because I'm definitely someone who just like gets dialed in and just plays the game that's available with the information that's available. But right afterward, when like 4 different people on the team like lined up to give me like a huge hug and were like, thank you so much, I was like, holy shit, that was crazy. Was super fun to clinch the win for the team. Felt really good after that. And yeah, I mean, to think about the fact that we were basically going into the one of the few rounds that decided the whole event after that point was pretty crazy. So next up, round 5, we're going up against Poland.
Absolutely. Nick, can you tell us a little bit about the storied history of the Poles, the greatest WTC team there ever was?
I mean, you basically said it right there. They kind of like Germany, like I was saying with the last round. They basically, you have to beat them to win the tournament. At least that's how it's been. They definitely, I don't know, I forget who was like the most wins. I think it's Poland historically has the most wins of ETC and WTC. If not, they're definitely in the top 3. I know last year USA had a little bit of a rough round into them. USA was trying to podium and got knocked out by the Polish after tying Australia, I believe. So yeah, this year we went in not wanting to be unprepared, and well, knowing that in order to win the event, we're going to have to face off against them at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to the history tab on the WTC website, they rank all of the teams by average placement percentage, which is attendances minus placements minus attendances divided by attendances, which is a weird way to do it. You can think about the math later. But Poland are ranked number 1 as the historic best WTC team, followed by Germany, followed by Sweden, followed by England, followed then by the US of A. This is not including this year's rankings. So they are something to play against. Poland is a lot of fun for a lot of reasons. One of them is that almost everyone on their team has a very has a very difficult to pronounce Polish name and a very fun nickname that they tend to prefer to go by. So if you're looking at their rankings and struggling to understand who is doing what, look for the nicknames and quotes there. They're generally how these players get referred to. Poland also has historically been captain, coached, and played by their one of their guys nicknamed Typhus, who's a big member of the Stat Check and enter the Stat Check team, and he runs the Into the Matrix podcast. He was not playing this year. I don't think he was even formally coaching. He was more support staff and media coverage, but he was a lot of fun to have around to be talking about how this round was going with. Because, man, these guys know their stuff. So, who do we pair you into for Poland, Lucas?
So I played against. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, but his nickname is Pumbaa. So he was doing a lot of the pairings work for the team, and ended up playing against him, and it was a really fun game.
I believe he is their captain this year.
Oh, really?
I'm fairly certain.
Oh, okay. Well, I played against the Polish team captain, Pog. He's playing Thousand Suns. I'll take you through the list real quick, or at least the highlights of it. Thousand Suns, Airman on disc, Exalted Sorcerer on disc, 1 Infernal Master with Arcane Vortex, Magnus the Red, 2,000 Sun Sorcerers. Those are the guys who don't shoot past, you give low not past 18 inches. 10 Rubric Marines with Flamers, 10 Rubric Marines with Bolters, 5, 5, and 5 Rubrics, so 35 Rubric Marines in total, 3,000 Suns Rhinos, 3 Zangor Enlightened, 3 Flamers, and the Blue Scribes. So, fairly standard European style T-Suns list. Of particular note, no Terminators at all. And obviously Magnus is here, 35 rubrics, and a couple of demon allies for some scoring. This was a pretty interesting game. I forgot where exactly in the pairings this happened, but I think it was pretty early on. Maybe that was against
Yeah,
England,
I think so.
I know in England I got the Thousand Suns pairing basically immediately, but that'll be it. That'll come up in a minute. Yeah, pretty interesting table here. Of particular note, 4 of the ruins have their like long edge facing the opponent, so it's very easy to hide on this table. Getting angles, getting shot from behind the walls is very difficult because they're facing the opponent, and also the midfield objectives are holdable from behind the walls, so it's very easy to put units behind walls and have the objective be more or less non-contestable. So this was a match I was very excited to go first on. The tempo is very important in Thousand Suns, and if you can force them to commit resources early, you can start chipping into their cabal points and take apart their little, their well-oiled machine a little bit. I took Cleanse, and I should talk about the mission before anything else happens. This is Vital Ground. That's the one where the middle objective disappears. Home objectives worth 2 VP, middle objectives worth 5, enemy objective worth 6, Chilling Rain, and Crucible of Battle. So diagonal hammer and anvil style. I took Cleanse and Homer, and Pumbaa decided to go with Tactical. Going first, like I mentioned, was really big. Just walked up, did my actions. Pumbaa responded fairly aggressively. He drove. If I'm in the upper right-hand corner, he's in the lower left, because that's how it is on stream. You can watch this game on stream, by the way, at War Games Live. He pushed a Rhino onto the bottom right objective with a bunch of Flamer guys in it, dumped them out, and did some damage. And then he also pushed another Rhino onto the top left objective. So he basically answered my aggression with aggression in turn to prevent me from getting a bunch of primary points. Moved Magnus kind of into that middle L on the left side of the table, just kind of inviting in a charge, baiting in a charge. I respond by calling the Wog and just slamming into him with my full army. I figure if I just throw away my army over the course of the next 2 turns to prevent him from getting onto the objectives, then I've done my job. I jump this is one of the games where few games where I've used my Weird Boy squad aggressively. I give them +2 to charge, jump them into his backfield, take his home field from the Zangors, and then the rubrics that he's played aggressively, so like the 10 or 15 that are up in my face, all get just charged by boys and drowned in AP1 saves. The Rubric Marine into Orc Boy math is actually pretty good for Orc Boys because they have lots of attacks. The Thousand Suns usual defense of I get to blank saves, I get to reroll saves doesn't really matter because I just hand them 30 saves at AP1. And being Strength 5 AP1 matches up really nicely into Toughness 4 3 armor save. So I kill about 15 rubrics that turn. I kill a lot of his screening stuff. So some Rhinos go down, some Zangors go down, screen out the Flamers from being able to come in and do anything meaningful, and continue to rack up my fixed secondary points. I also put a lot of damage on Magnus this turn and tag him in combat so he can't go anywhere. I think Maggie was down to like 6 or 7 wounds at the end of this turn, something like that. And he is stuck in that ruin toward the middle of the table. Pumbaa just responds with a blistering salvo of firepower that removes all of the orcs that I have in front of his face. He killed like 40, 50 orcs, something like that this turn between Overwatch and his actual shooting phase. which has definitely got me on the back foot. But I start picking up some actual primary here just because he isn't able to stand on the objectives because of where all my orcs were. And then I just keep up the aggression, take out Magnus on the following turn, continue to drown the objectives in dudes. And at this point, he's basically just got 3 flamers, which come out of Deep Strike, most of Airman's squad, and a single Rhino left, and that just isn't enough to hold the table. He does pick up a couple primary points and secondary points from the tactical deck in the late game, as I just run out of stuff to be able to contest him, and he moves onto the objectives from the bottom of turn. But this was a classic example of some early safe staging, baits out an opponent's response to prevent you from getting primary points, and then you slam them with your whole army and do as much damage as possible, prevent them from scoring any further points, and just lock down the game from there. So definitely some funny moments in this game. Ended up killing Magnus with some random single like Beast Snaggle Boy or something like that. I also had 3 custom mega cannons show up in Pumbaa's backfield and just chill back there for the whole game and like contest his home objective a couple times because they're randomly OC2, which is the same as OC as a Rhino. I don't know why that's a thing, but it is. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was fun to feel like in control of the game the entire time. Pumbaa definitely did some stuff that took me off guard, but overall I felt completely in control of the tempo of this game, and it was fun to have an idea about how the tempo of the game was going to go and see that borne out in practice basically perfectly. Everything that I thought was going to happen ended up more or less panning out, and it was very rewarding to see that happen. Any questions about this game? Like I mentioned, you can watch this game on War Games Live. It's a really fun one. Joe and Camilleri do a great job commentating and offer a lot of fun advice and thoughts on the game. And it's definitely a good one.
Hell yeah, dude. How do you think this... is what I say. Do you think Pumbaa... like that was a mistake on his part to react to your sort of bait there and provide such a strong aggressive force? Do you think if he just sits back and allows you to take a turn of points and then asks you, well, are you going to get more aggressive? Like, can you sit there and stand off, or what happens if he doesn't respond in kind like that?
Yeah, it's difficult because the primary on this mission is so hard to come by because you don't really, there's fewer objectives and you don't score that many for holding your home field. I personally, if I was him, would have castled up a lot harder, like pregame chosen one of the objectives to try to like create a natural expansion on, and then just lock down that objective so that hopefully on turn 3 or 4, once most of the aggression is petered out, he can actually score 5 points a couple of times, as opposed to the way it actually panned out, which was he got like on primary, it was like 0, 2, 2, 5, something like that, more or less. So I think, given the situation he was in, I think he had responded appropriately to get the total number of points that he could. I think it would have gone better for him overall if pregame he would have decided, okay, I think I probably would have gone, for example, for that objective in the top left, put Magnus very aggressively over there, put 2 rhinos with 15 or 20 dudes in it over there, and left some token force to maybe contest the low red objective once or twice for a 5-point swing, something like that. Whereas the way it was, he kind of had rubrics spread all over the board, and it was very easy for me to kind of piecemeal him. So given the hand he was dealt and the way he was deployed, I think he did it, approach the situation appropriately. But if I were to do it again, and if I were him, I would have changed the way I deployed a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I highly recommend people check out this game, not only because it's awesome to watch Lucas go crump some gits, especially when those gits are some of the best players on the planet. I also recommend this game, especially if you're a Thousand Sons player, in terms of the tenacity of Pumbaa throughout the course of this, right? It is clear very early on that Lucas is going to win this game, right? It is not... There's no, like, crazy back and forth. They're like, oh, yeah, cool. Lucas is being insane. Oh, my God, this is crazy. And Pumbaa, like, it would be very easy, in a single setting especially, to just give up immediately and sort of say, cool, that's a 20-0, great, moving on. But Pumbaa stuck in there, fought for every one of those 4 points that he was able to get out of it. I think he plays turns 3 through 5 with, like, 1 squad and a sorcerer.
Yep.
Like, that 1 squad and 3 flamers, I think.
And he maximizes his points given the resources at his disposal.
Yeah. That is a hard thing to do mentally, to stick with it and remember how important all of these points are and fight for them. It's very easy to talk about, but in practice, to keep your cool, not become emotionally defeated, and focus on what you actually have to do. Absolute masterclass in getting blood from a stone. Really impressed with how Pumbaa handles himself here, despite getting run over by the Karmi. So great job to you both. This was an awesome game. Probably one of the best things on stream at WTC this weekend.
Yeah, it was fun.
Sweet. So we finish up this round. Lucas pulls off the sick 16-4. That's sweet. Unfortunately, the rest of the games don't end up going quite as well in our favor. As discussed earlier, we didn't discuss anything earlier. Yeah. So in this round, we had one game go especially sour, which was that we put Shuckman into the Eldar mirror again, knowing pretty well that their Eldar list was way better tech for the mirror than ours was, hoping Shuckman could come out with, like an 8 if he does his thing. No such luck. Duda is fantastic, and that Eldar list is more appropriately equipped, and I think Duda also went first. Just real sketchy, especially on a mission where you can't hold primary very easily. Things slip pretty hard, and Shuckman ends up losing 3-17. And then the rest of the round is us trying to claw back from that. And the other horrific thing was that Anthony got blown up by a Dark Angels Land Raider. Oh man, what a bummer that was. He ends up dropping in. I think the big highlight of that story was that he drops in with 2 squads of obliterators, one to finish off the Land Raider. He needs to get two failed saves through, and another to kill the aggressors after they get out. And the squad of obliterators rolls like 4 shots, 6 hits, 5 wounds, and the dude passes 4 out of 5 up saves. And it's like, well, damn it. So that slipped away real quick, and Anthony got 18-2'd by the Dark Angels, which between that and Matt really put us on the back foot, which is a bummer because the rest of these games were some really great, tight teams wins. Jaime pulls a 12-8 with his Deathwatch into their Tau. Harpster pulls an 11-9 into their Necrons with his Grey Knights. Naden pulls a 16-4 into their GSC. Sick. It was a great game. And then Lennon pulls an 11-9 in the Custodes Mirror. Forceman ends up getting an 8 into Skark, which is great. Skark, for those of y'all who don't know, is the guard player for Poland. He was the number 1 performing player at WTC. Absolutely slaughtered people, and he beats Americans every single year. This was the closest an American has ever come to beating him, so big props to Eric for that. This man's a menace. He's like I don't know how old this guy is, I don't want to be insulting, but he's definitely a very small, middle-aged, mostly balding Polish man who just huddles around the table and just blows people up. He's awesome, and him and Eric have become like an unlikely set of friends, which has been hilarious. So, with those all tallied up, we end up drawing Poland 79 for us to 81 for them. So a lot of places where a couple points could have pulled it off for us, but we're really honestly proud out of that final result there. Poland is, again, the best in the business. They end up winning the remainder of their games, so a draw into them feels excellent. Really good work by all of our guys. Really happy with the final result there.
Yep. Great job overall.
Sweet. So, weren't able to, if we had beaten Poland here, that's basically the event, but no such luck. We got a draw, which means we're still in the hunt. Poland and us both, was at 4-0-1 now, so we'll just go see who can beat up on the rest of our opponents better, and that brings us into Team England on round 5. Hashtag anyone but England. These are, of course, our rivals from across the pond, and we were ready to bring the pain. So, Lucas, talk to us a little bit about how we ended up pairing you into the English.
Yeah, so I was paired very early on in the round. I think they defended with Thousand Suns right away, and we offered them Grey Knights and Orcs with the thought of getting our Grey Knights off the table early since they had some sketchy matchups, and also Orcs because I had just demolished Thousand Suns. So we figured, give them a bad matchup or give them something that we kind of want to get rid of. And they ended up taking the Orcs, calling our bluff, and it worked out very well for them. So I'm going to see if I can change the slides here. Hey,
I got you,
there we
bro.
go. Wait, this is my table?
This is what you put in the
yes,
slides.
this is what my brain was moving slowly, okay? So yeah, this was the table I played against Vic Vijay on. Vic is one of the co-hosts of the Fireside 40K podcast. Amazing podcast. If you, for some reason, listen to us and don't listen to them, go listen to them. They are incredible. And just an amazing 40K player and person all around. And I thoroughly enjoyed my game with him. And yeah, this was definitely an interesting round. Kind of going over the mission and the table here. We played on, what was it, Priority Target, and then I Can't Believe It's Not Dawn of War, and with Chilling Reign. So Priority Target is you score 5 for holding 1, 10 for holding 2, excuse me, and then at the end of the game, for every objective that you hold, you score an additional 5 points to a cap of 15. So going second is really big because you get to, get your 10 points on turn 5 and then get a 15 for holding 3 objectives. So a big point swings can come at the end of the game on this mission. So playing against Vic, he's got a list very similar to Pumbaa's list, so I won't go into it too much. He takes a few less Rubric Marines. He takes one less Rhino, and he instead puts in a Vortex Beast and a couple more characters, so it's much more character heavy. With that in mind, I actually end up taking Assassinate here. So I have Assassinate and Homer instead of Cleanse Homer. And he goes with Fixed as well. This was the first opponent that I had all weekend that took Fixed against me. And I think the results of the round show that Fixed is the way to go against Orcs. If you're going to have to clear your way through a bunch of trucks, you may as well get a bunch of points out of it. So Vic ends up taking Homer because it's busted and bring it down. I end up going first on this particular mission. There's a couple things that make this table dramatically different than the previous one, even though they are both like kind of diagonal tables with one large 3-story no window ruins. The first one is look at where the midfield objectives are. On this table, obviously the one in the middle is open in the middle. There's also crates in the middle of the table, which makes moving the trucks around much more difficult. And then there's also a big open space right in front of the midfield objectives. And those midfield objectives are out in the open. So the one in the top left and the bottom right, out in the open, there's basically nowhere to hide. As soon as you're on the objective, you're getting shot, and the guys inside of any vehicles that are in that objective are also getting shot once the vehicle dies. So much more open. There's a lot more cover in like the corners of the battlefield, but that doesn't really matter all that much. By contrast, if you back up one slide just really quickly, the map I played Pumbaa on, a lot more terrain concentrated in the middle of the table, a lot more terrain concentrated near where the objectives are, so hiding and cutting angles and staying safe from firepower is a lot easier. So that made my game plan a lot harder on that table. If we go back one more time, sorry, this is the last time I'll ask you to do that. Here we are. So here's the table I'm playing against Vic on. It is basically impossible for me to stage units to be able to contest his natural expansion easily. So what do I mean by that? That objective in the top left, it's the one that's like more or less closest to his ZZ. He's able to put the most stuff on that side of the table and move on to the objective very easily. Think about where I can actually hide my units to be able to move on to the objective and contest it. I've got that slanted L that's in the very top left corner that I can't really hide trucks behind at all. And then I've got the solid L, which opens more or less toward the objective. So if I'm in that piece of terrain, he can shoot me with Magnus. And if I'm behind the piece of terrain, then I'm like 20 plus inches away from the objective. So it's basically impossible for me to contest it. So he's got 2 very safe objectives. And if I think about the way I defeated Pumbaa last round, it was by denying his primary for 2 or 3 rounds while I racked up a secondary advantage. Well, he already went over the fact that Vic took better secondaries than Pumbaa did. He's going to get more points just from naturally playing the game. He has lots of trash that can just go and get teleport Homer. So he's going to match me on secondaries very easily. And the primary denial game plan is not going to go nearly as well. He's got his safe objective in the back corner. If he just puts a squad of Rubrics with Flamers on that objective, I can never move on to it, because I would have to brave Overwatch. Denying that objective is going to be basically impossible. And I already went over why aggressing onto his natural expansion is going to be impossible. So from turn 2 onward, turn 3 onward, if he wants to be extra cautious, Vic's going to be able to score those primary points super easily. So all of this in summary means that, Vic played the game excellently, so I won't take this away from him. But I also approached this with just completely the wrong mindset. I should have seen this table, kind of thought about how the tempo of the game would have gone. I walked to the table and said, oh, attacking that objective is going to be very difficult for me. But I didn't change my game plan appropriately. I just tried to attack it anyway and completely failed, which is part of the reason why I ended up not doing so well this game. I should have approached the table, thought, how am I going to score my points this game? Oh, attacking his primary is basically impossible. I should deploy defensively, play this game very passively, and just shoot for 8 to 10 points in a very stable fashion instead of going for those wild Hail Mary plays to try to turn this into green like I thought I was going to get. I told the team I was going to get a green, so I'm like, I need to push for this. I need to make it happen. I need to get 12 points. And that ended up hurting us in the long run, and it turned this game into much more of a blowout in Vic's favor than it needed to be. If I post up behind all of those walls, and just kind of sit there and wait for him to make the first move, it is much harder for him to come forward and aggress into me, especially if I'm completely hidden and not giving him resources for free to shoot at. I think I can make this game into a tie or just a very narrow loss. As it turned out, what happened was I spent a bunch of resources on turn 2 and 3 to just try to deny like 5 points, which I maybe did once or twice. And then Vic just rolled up the flank, blew me out of the water. His Magnus never took any damage. Never even ended up in combats that he didn't want to be in. And he just locked me out of the game from there, rolled up my flank, and ended up on my home field actually on turn 4, which was really bad. So it was me who ended up having the primary deny just because I lost so many early resources and could not respond to his aggression once he had cleared out all my stuff. So Vic played the game excellently. I won't take it away from him, but I definitely approached this with completely the wrong mindset. That's something I've never really been all that great at as a player, is like quick adaptation to changing circumstances. I should have seen the table and the mission and realized I needed to play a different game than I played against Pumbaa, but I didn't do that. So ends up being a pretty disastrous loss for me. I ended up only getting 3 points this round to Vic's 17. So very well played, and definitely educational experience. And yeah, definitely nasty to see all the things that Thousand Suns can do when orchestrated correctly. So it was a very well played game.
Very cool. I feel like we're not seeing T-Suns very much in the U.S. meta, like, at all. And when we are, it doesn't look anything like these. Can you talk about some of the highlights of this Euro-style T-Suns list and what makes it so effective that we just, kind of got blindsided by? But what's the sauce here?
Yeah, the big thing that you see when you look at the average UK versus average US, or average European versus average US T-Suns list, is the absence of the 10-man Terminator brick. In the European list, it's basically never present. There's a couple reasons for this. The first one, which Vic put really succinctly and is like the strongest reason why, is he believes, and I agree, that number of activations and redundancy is really, really important in 10th edition. So it's less powerful to have just one big brick that shows up, does a ton of damage, and then that's all it does. Because that's relatively one-dimensional, people can counter that by like screening, positioning appropriately, baiting it. It's basically a one-and-done missile. There's all sorts of reasons why that like one teleport Terminator brick is way too many eggs in one basket. By contrast, if you take all those points and invest them into small characters that join rubric squads, you have a lot more of a dynamic play style. You have less eggs in one basket. If you lose one piece of the puzzle, it's less of a disastrous blow. Whereas once the Terminators have teleported, if they get tagged and they're not able to get out of combat, that's like a game losing condition, right? Like it's a loss condition. Same kind of thing. If Terminators and Magnus, if you lose one of the two pieces, that is disastrous. Whereas the European style list, if you lose 10 or 15 rubrics, it's a big blow, but it's not completely game over. You have way more resources to run around and play the game with. the highlight of the European list are the 5 or 6 squads of rubrics. Usually they're 5-mans as opposed to 10-mans. Pumbaa had some 10-mans. I think that's totally a reasonable take. But the 5-man squads with 3 flamers, flame pistol, assault cannon, what's it called? Soul Reaper cannon, and joined by a character are really, really powerful, especially the Infernal Master. If you haven't run into the Infernal Master yet, he has a 2d6 flamer at 6-2-1. For some godforsaken reason, it's 18-inch range. So they have an AP2 heavy flamer with 18-inch range. And because he joins Rubric Marines, he gets full reroll the wound when the target's on an objective that you don't control. So, and it's obviously a psychic weapon. So with the T-Sun's army ability, you choose devastating wounds more or less every turn. You have a full reroll the wound 18-inch range flamer, so you don't have to roll the hit. That has lots of opportunities to generate devastating wounds. And then after you've rolled the wound, re-rolled the wounds, you then get to flip one of the die to a 6 as long as the Infernal Master is leading a squad. So this guy's ability to like generate 4 or 5 mortal wounds every single time he activates is excellent and very reliable. And then you also shoot the Soul Reaper cannon, get a couple mortal wounds. You shoot the flamethrowers, you get some extra damage. The Aspiring Sorcerer in the squad also has a gun. Like the number of weapons that this squad has is just ridiculous for the fact that it's just a 6-man unit. So, yeah, the 5-man rubrics, very versatile, very cheap, good but not crippling damage, and they're just great overall. Another thing they do much better than Terminators is generate Cabal points. I'm used to playing against T-Suns that only have like 12 Cabal points. They can do like one big thing and then one small thing. Vixless had like 20, I don't know, 21, 23, something like that. He was doing 3 or 4 major game-changing rituals every single turn, and that was really strong. So, yeah. Overall, to summarize, the number of Cabal points you're generating, the flexibility on the table, the lack of eggs all in one basket, and just the overall flexibility in terms of where the damage comes from are the reasons why I think the Rubric build is stronger than the Terminators build.
Very cool. And I know that Nick is looking into playing some of this at some upcoming practices and events and whatnot. Hopefully we'll get a bit rep of it on the channel fairly soon.
Cool.
It's very cool stuff.
Yeah.
What you have anything to add about what makes this list so cool, Nick?
I mean, Lucas kind of hit all of it. Yeah, it's what I really like about, I mean, that kind of army and like Vix lists in general is it's a army that feels like it's a bunch of little pieces that can solve little problems on their own, but then you can combine multiple pieces to solve larger problems, or like you can combine the whole army to solve like a big problem. And it just kind of feels like this like super cool, I don't know, organism that works together super well. And I just love the idea of playing an army like that.
Hell yeah. Very cool. Sweet. Well, this round in England didn't end up quite the way we were hoping for. We're looking to put them in the ground. Didn't happen so much, but there were some crazy swings in a couple of these games. So, as discussed, Lucas ends up getting a 317. Massive bummer. But so it goes. Matt Schuckman with his Eldar goes into Josh Roberts and his Custodes. 20 O's the fool. Let's go, Shucky. Don't fuckle with the Shuckle. Naden's Nids goes into Nassim and his Death Watch. Nassim, classically exceptionally aggressive player, plays games very quickly. They were still going 3 hours and 20 minutes in, and Nassim's entire army was still in his DZ behind a wall. It was hilarious to watch. So good on him there. Eric Forsman, our GSC, goes into Alex Harrison, their guard player. That's a draw. It's a 10-10. And then a couple of real bummers. Jaime Paris ends up losing to their Chris Canera's Chaos Space Marines 17-3. That's not a great matchup for Death Watch, but we were definitely hoping to get a couple more points out of that, shooting for something like a 7 or an 8 instead of a 3 or a 5. But, you know, it happens. They're really good at Warhammer, it turns out. We put Lennon's Custodes into Manny's Eldar. So we put our Custodes into their Eldar and their Eldar into our Custodes. Our Eldar 20-0'd their Custodes. Their Eldar into John 13-7. Nice try, Manny. We're very happy with that result. Great job, John. That is, to win both sides of that was what we thought we had to do to win the round. Ended up bleeding points in other places, but that was sick. Jack Harpster's Grey Knights 10-10, and it's Matt Robertson's Tyranids. Functionally expected result. It was looking a little sketchy there, so props to Jack for pulling it out, but good stuff. And then this was honestly the biggest success story of the round.
Hero.
the absolute legend, the king, Anthony Vanella, Violence himself on the Chaos Space Marines, playing into Mike Porter's GSC. We wrote this off as like a 2, maybe a 3.
Horrific.
Mans comes back with a 10 frickin' 10. Let's go, Violence. Now, this did involve Mike Porter failing a rerollable 4-inch charge with his Aberrants after a Bomba Squad killed 2 Terminators in total. Was hilarious, but, it's a dice game. So that was sick as hell. Bomba, indeed.
Bomba.
Maybe not so Bomba. So mad props to Anthony for pulling that off. That is the only reason we did not lose this round, as we ended up drawing it 76-84. So into Germany, we win by only a point, and into England, we draw by 2 points. Some tight games to go around there. But a draw is a draw, so we're still feeling good. We're still ahead of England because they had a draw earlier on. Or they had an... I don't remember the standings at this point. But we're way ahead of them on points, at least, if we're tied now. Good stuff. This was probably the biggest bummer round, I think, in my mind, as an overall team. Drawing the polls is great. We're very happy with that. And we won a lot of other rounds. This was the one where there was opportunity. But Lucas getting scammed by Vic here. I don't know, scammed. Getting outplayed. Vic is phenomenal. We're all massive fans of Vic Vijay. Check out his show, 40K Fireside. You probably already know about it, but if you don't, now you do. Absolutely lovely dude who plays some incredible Warhammer, so that was great. He's beaten Nick. He's beaten Lucas. I'm sure he's coming for my ass next. Love that guy. So that was a bummer, and Jaime as well getting blown out, also a real bummer. But so it goes, a draw is a draw, and we move on in to round 7, the final round, and we are currently in second place behind Poland. Now, we're going to play into Sweden, and Poland is going to play into England. Now, we are still in the money here because Poland could draw or lose to England here while we defeat Sweden. So if it ends up being such that if Poland and England draw and we get a lot more points than Poland does, 13 more to be exact. So like at worst we need a 98, but possibly less than that. We'll end up on top. If we draw or lose, we have no chance in this at all. And if we get at a big win and Poland also ends up getting a win, we'll end up in second place, which is very respectable for the U.S. So we're feeling pretty good. We know Sweden really well. They're very good friends of ours. We've played into them a bunch. We've practiced them a bunch. Sweden has been on a princess success story, and I mean that in the sense of like they have been kicking butt in ways that I don't think people were betting on them to win. Did they kick the crap out of France? Do I remember correctly? I'm trying to remember what Sweden's massive
go see
upset was. Round.
They beat Germany.
They beat Germany and they beat France.
5.
They crushed France. They beat France 93-67. What was their score into Germany?
90-70.
Damn, so they did way better into Germany than we did, and they kicked the crap out of France. They are on a tear, and we are here to end it. So they're no joke, but we'll see what we can do. What do we pair you into, Lucas, for our final round of the World Team Championship?
Green Steel Occults, yet again. Whee!
You'll love to see it,
I'm excited for another
really
4-hour game. Whee!
Watching you guys still have like 2 turns left to play while the round was essentially over, and like your score was pretty straightforward. It was just execution, and it still took you another hour and a half.
Gotta bring in 200 models, bro, and shoot with all of them. What can I say?
All right, so we're playing the GSC, and this GSC was a little bit, there was a little something going on here. Tell us about it, Lucas.
Yeah, definitely an interesting list. I believe the guy's name was Olaf Svensson, like for the most Scandinavian name imaginable. One of you guys can find that while I recount the list.
Yeah,
but
Olaf
Indeed, Olaf Svensson.
Nice. So yeah, great guy. Really fun game. His list was definitely very different than other GSC lists I've played against. Normal stuff, like in terms of 3 Primus, Bomba ladies, and 3 Bomba squads. He had 120 neophytes.
Let's go, king shit.
And he had no aberrants. So he was just all dudes and no, meat to back them up. So definitely interesting game. We rock up to the table, and like usually with WTC rounds, there's like a little bit of, people don't want to give away their game plan or that kind of thing. But like we're both super tired, and by this point, he's probably seen that I played against GSC 2 or 3 times and shellacked him every time. And he's like, I don't really want this. I didn't really want this round. This round sucks. Like I'm expecting to get completely rolled. My only plan is to deploy 20, with my infiltrate Primus with 20 neophytes right on the line and go first. And I'm like, I mean, if that happens, dude, you might just completely kick my ass. It's totally doable. So, of course, true to his word, Olaf deploys his 20 neophytes basically strung out across the entire middle of the table. We are playing on corners, by the way, take and hold. So just like hold 1 for 5, hold 2 for 10. Very basic mission. Deploys his neophytes in the middle, and I am realizing, yes, if he goes first, I will be locked into my deployment zone for 2 or 3 turns, which will be bad. But luckily, I end up going first, which means I can move out and just get those neophytes out of the way. Very importantly, that also means that one of the Primuses is dead, so his drop turns are not going to hurt nearly as badly because one of his sources of Chapter Master is just completely gone. And because the Primus is completely busted, I am a lot less scared of his drop turn now. So make my way onto all the midfield objectives. I got 2 turns to do it because this is the first GSC game I go first in, which felt so nice. And just generally kind of locked down all the objectives and then just threw waves of stuff into his deployment zone. He kept having to 3-inch deep strike and, move neophytes up to move block and get in the way, which was very well done from him. It definitely blunted my aggression and kept his backfield objective completely safe for most of the game. But I figured what the team needed for me at this point was just like a safe, reliable green result. So not receiving any word to push and make big Hail Mary plays, I decided it was fine if he just kept his home field for the whole game, and I just locked down all the midfields and prevented him from scoring them. Olaf was very smart. He took fixed secondaries. Like I said in the Vic round, taking fixed is what you should do if you ever play against an orc trash list like this. You should take Bring It Down, and if they give it up, you should take Assassinate, and if not, you should probably take Homer. And Olaf saw that. He took Homer and Bring It Down and scored very well on both of them. So I thought that was very wise of him to do. But overall, I scored better on Assassinate than he did on Bring It Down, and I scored better on Homer than he did on Homer. And with my better primary control, that just meant that I outscored him on both accounts and ended up taking the round. I believe it was 15-5. Playing against no aberrants was definitely really interesting. I'm curious what the game would have looked like if I went second. I think that probably would have been very sketchy, but I felt pretty in control of this game the whole way through, having gone first. There was not really much he could have done to actually make his way onto the objectives other than some really creative ingress plays, which he did try and had some success with. But just overall, it was very difficult for him to solve the problem of get on objective and kill truck and contents while I was, on the objectives. So was definitely a very interesting game.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I feel like we've heard a lot about the GSC matchups. You're doing the thing. Excellent to see you execute and get a full 15-5 out of it. To run through the rest of the matchups, we did bust Sean this time. We put him into Eldar. The Eldar went first, killed 3 big monsters, and then zoned the table to prevent his Carnifexes from coming in from Strat Reserve. And 20-0. Great.
Goodbye,
nice
soldier.
Job. Sorry, Sean. It was bound to happen eventually. We put Lenin's Custodes into their orcs, and he won that 18-2, despite refusing to take fixed for some reason. The guy had so many characters. Tabled him. Anyway, we put Eric's GSC into their Custodes, came out as a 10-10. We put Shucky's Eldar into their Deathwatch, 19-1. You'll love to see it. We put Harpster's Granites into Kala Abrahamson, who is one of the best players in the world. Fantastic dude. He was playing Necrons. Jack ends up losing this one 8-12. Jack claims he got scammed by dice. Maybe he's right. I didn't watch that game all that. Were you watching that game closely, Nick?
The Necrons GK game?
Yeah.
I came over. Jack played in Necrons a few times over the weekend, and the story of that game was basically 30, chunky Terminators rush the Eldar. Not Eldar, rush the Necrons. pin them into their DZ, out primary them, and then Jack either draws well or poorly on cards. And you come over to him and he's drawn badly on cards, and he's like, minus 10 points. What's happening? And then you come over another turn, he's like, plus 10 points. Let's go. Booyah, baby. And that's basically the story of the weekend. This game was like, he's like, cards are looking good. We got him in his DZ. We're fighting some Lich Guard. And I come over like an hour later, and there's like 4 Grey Knights left and 20 Lich Guards still. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, I couldn't kill him, and I couldn't make saves, and they ran me over.
No.
So cards didn't bone him that game. He just kind of like got dice. I don't know. I didn't really see the flipping point. I just saw the before and after image. So yeah.
Interesting.
Turns out Call's a good player, and
yeah,
ended up being an 8-12. Not as bad as I thought it would be. Luckily, the flip seemed to happen on like turn 4.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure Jack is going to do like an Art of War episode or something talking about this Grey Knights list, and I'm sure he'll talk about this game then. So check that out for more details. But yeah, very cool. We put Anthony into their Imperial Knights again with his Chaos Space Marines, and he continues to deliver 18-2. Got him. And then we put Jaime into JSJ, who is their captain, Jonathan Slade Johnson. Jaime on his Death Watch, JSJ on his Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights continuing to give us some trouble throughout the weekend. We barely considered that faction. We wrote them off pretty quickly, despite playing a lot of games with them. The Euros settled on a list that we had not figured out yet, which was 14 dogs, by taking just the right dogs and no demon allies, which was pretty darn cool. And yeah, most of our armies actually struggle into that. Jaime took a little bit of an L there. Deathwatch don't have great anti-tank.
That was kind of one of the themes of the whole event, by the way. We can talk about this afterward, but just like how much Deathwatch struggled with a lot of armies out there, especially those that have heavy armor. Like if you play into Custodes or CSM or Thousand Sons or Knights or Imperial or Chaos Knights, it's like there's so many matchups that just have lots of big, chunky vehicle dudes and like heavy armor that Deathwatch just struggle into.
Yeah, I think they needed a lot more babysitting and pairings than we anticipated. We didn't really even pick out matchups for him to go after. We were kind of like, oh, this army's good. Go win games. You're good at Warhammer.
It's good in the GSC. Infiltrators.
Yeah. And then we proceeded to immediately pair GSC into, the other 2 armies we brought that are good into GSC every round. But I digress. So the final score of that round ends up being 94-66, which is enough that if Poland only ended up with an 81 or below as their draw, we would still have ended up on top, which is pretty respectable. However, England put up functionally 0 resistance into Poland based on the score. I mean, they did their best. They're good at Warhammer, but like Poland... Poland won that round 100-60.
That's a fairly big one, considering it's the very last round.
Yeah, that's a very impressive win they pulled off. Skark 20-0'd their Custodes, Duda 20-0'd their Tyranids, and then they got 13-7, 11-9, 10-10, Pumbaa 14-6 their Death Watch. Manny got a 17-3 into their Dark Angels as the biggest win for the Team England, followed by Mike Porter 11-9ing their Necrons with GSC. Like, man, 320? No, it was just 2? Yeah, 220s is just pretty insurmountable in WTC. You get 20'd twice, you're losing. It was very, very funny to be in a situation where we were rooting for England, and it did not work out well. So, at the end of the day, the final placings for the event at large. Let me pull them up here so I can do a bit of a run up. Team placings. We had England coming in 5th, going 4-2 and 4-1-2. Sweden actually came in 4th, going 5-2-0, which is funny because those 2 draws that England had are equivalent in match points to the 1 loss that Sweden took, or the second loss, and then they outdid them on tiebreaker points. The Aussies snuck into 3rd. They had a draw real early, and then a loss, which put them down a kind of a dark path. But then they fought their way back through, got a lot of points, ended up 5-1-1, coming in 3rd. In 2nd place, we have the United States of America, going undefeated with 5-0-2, and in 1st place, our boys, the Poles, pulling it out 6-0-1. Mad respect to Team Poland. They absolutely kicked ass this year. Fantastic players, great time to play against, fantastic pairings. They're the real deal. And we can't wait to be back next year for them again. Sweet.
Yeah.
So those are the standings at the end of the event. You guys want to take a couple minutes, give some reflections on the event overall? Probably start with Lucas.
Yeah, for sure. This was just such an amazing event. Honestly felt amazing to be a part of something that was. I mean, usually so far my 40K experience has been almost exclusively singles. And then in the last year, I've played at my two favorite 40K events have been both the team events, right? Like feeling like I'm part of something bigger than just whatever matchups I happen to get and how I happen to play at an event was super wonderful. Feeling like, I was there to carry and support and like champion the team in some rounds. Like in the Germany round, I was like, the highlight of the team, like pulling through and making sure that we got a win we got the narrowest of wins instead of a draw was super amazing. But then also from time to time being like, oh, I kind of, it was a bit of a fluke this round. I kind of dropped the ball a little bit. My teammates are there to pick me up and make sure that we, carry the round through. It was also really fun. Teams 40K is just so much fun. And, going into the tournament, I was not feeling exceptionally confident, especially in the phase of working toward what army I was going to play for the event. There was a long period in the month running up to WTC where I was very stressed about not knowing what army I was going to play for. 1 week I was on Necrons. The next week I was on, for a minute I was on Chaos Knights, but no one really actually thought I was going to play Chaos Knights. And then I was on Necrons, and then I was on Imperial Knights. And then there was one weekend, actually the Stumptown Stomp weekend, where I was playing Necrons at Stumptown Stomp. And then on Saturday, at lunchtime, I got a text that was like, we think you're going to be playing Imperial Knights. This is the role we think you're going to fill on the team. So I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to be playing Imperial Knights. And then the following day, I get a call from John that's like, here's why I think you should play Custodes. We think you're good fit for Custodes. And I'm like, sure, I guess I'll play Custodes. And then that happened before round 4 on Sunday. And then after round 4 on Sunday during lunchtime, I look at the Discord and there's all sorts of messages that I'm going to be playing Tyranids. And I'm like, I've been assigned 4 different armies in the course of 2 days. Like, this is ridiculous. So there was so much of that, just like incredible confusion and stress about what the hell I was going to play. So to finally settle on something where I actually felt confident and was excited to show up and be an orc for the weekend and just run at people with choppas was really fun. And I'm really glad I settled on something that made me really excited and happy to be playing Warhammer, because there was definitely a little bit of time where I was not looking forward to the event because I thought I was going to drop the ball and disappoint the team. But I feel like, not to toot my own horn or anything like that, but I definitely feel like I was one of the success stories of the team for the weekend, just like kicking so much ass with a list that no one really saw coming and everyone thought was just kind of like, this is a goofy like troll list that's just trying to get some points, and then ended up like smacking all the matchups that I thought I was going to smack. And, seeing that pan out was really fun. Also, big props to the pairings people for getting me to those matchups in the first place. So, yeah, just very cathartic and very rewarding to, the little voices in my head that are like, you're not that good at Warhammer. Here are all these reasons why you're not that good. And then actually, like, run out of excuses for why I'm doing well and just finally be able to acknowledge that, I am actually pretty good at this game. Has been really fun and cathartic, and just feeling amazing, honestly. Still reveling in the amazing achievement of it all.
Hell yeah, dude. That is some well-earned respect, and I am very glad to hear the negative self-talk subsiding a little bit in favor of rock-hard data. It was very funny. I think the Brits have been, their chant all weekend was US meta soft, and then at the final result I think they said like US meta average, I guess. And I feel like that was a similar result for you of like, yeah, you're doing good, but like, everything's pretty localized. No. You are kicking ass as a starter on the biggest stage in the World Team Championship of Warhammer. Like, Take it to him, dude.
Yeah, let's go.
Go out and make a name for yourself and for the boys and for the Pacific Northwest as a larger region. We've all been rooting for you real hard. So very excited about that. This was the coolest Warhammer thing that any of us have ever done. And it was tons of fun, and I cannot wait to see what next year looks like, and honestly what the prep for next year looks like, because this organization is just so much fun to be a part of.
Oh yeah.
How about you? How about you, Nick? Reflections?
Yeah, I mean, we've said it a lot already, and I think that the WTC is definitely the most exciting event that I've ever been a part of. I mean, we've been kind of slowly practicing for this since like October last year. So to finally kind of understand how it works and like get a feeling for how like the event is run and how it feels to play like a tight round. I mean, like, yeah, having that experience is invaluable. It's, irreplaceable. It's super awesome. I feel much more prepared if I were to do this again in the future. And I'm like much more excited to do it in the future because now there's a lot of that like nervousness is gone. I know a lot of, I think none of us had ever traveled to Europe as well, or really internationally that much. So kind of getting to understand how that works just means that if, we play again next year or in a future year, something like that, it's going to be a lot more exciting because it'll just be like, okay, you can solely focus on the Warhammer. Yeah, I also am glad because like last year, it seemed like the WTC got a lot of people in the US really excited about teams. And this year again, especially with War Games Live covering a lot of stuff, made it much more accessible to people in the US. And something that I'm really excited about is I've been hearing a lot of rumblings about 8-man teams events happening in the US. I know we have our own 5-man teams event that's going to be happening annually up here in June. And I know GW sometimes does one, and there's the ATC. Unfortunately, the ATC is like the week before WTC. So for anyone going to WTC, it's not a week, it's like 2 weeks before. Anyone going, it's really hard to go because most of the time you want to be spending that time focusing on WTC instead. So
Most of the time.
Yeah. If you have, I mean, just the idea of like having 1 or 2 more events during the year is super cool to see. And I'm glad that we're kind of breaking into that because, I mean, I went to LVTT last year. I went to WTC this year. We had our teams event in June. And I mean, those 3 events have been some of the most fun events for me. They're super memorable because not only are you spending the whole weekend with 5, 8, or more people, you're all in it together. It's different than like, hey, how's your record going this weekend? Oh, nice. Keep it up. Oh, we paired into each other. Bummer. One of us is going home sad. Like you guys all go home sad together. You guys all go home like feeling good together. Like your triumphs and your, accomplishments and pitfalls are all shared. So, yeah, super fun. I'm excited for the next one.
Absolutely. There is one more story that we do have to tell. As far as WTC coverage is concerned, anything else we can talk about at a later date. But we do need to spin the tale of the greatest guard player in all of Scotland.
Oh, yeah.
To let the people know.
Ben Jurek.
Benjamin! So for those of you who are not following Team USA on Facebook, or Team Scotland for that matter, Team Scotland's guard player, he got chickenpox and then kidney failure or something? The medical emergencies this weekend were absolutely insane. But he had to, at the last second, drop out, which was tragic. But Scotland, being good friends of ours, captained by Innes Wilson of StatCheck, who's a good friend of ours on Team USA, was like, hey, we need a guard player. You got anybody? And we looked around and we're like, yeah, we don't really play guard, but we got like players. And we sent over to him after much discussion. We sent our boy Ben Jurek, who has been on an absolute tear over in the US recently, playing Eldar, historically an orc player. Ben went hardcore into this. He went out and bought a kilt and the funny looking hat and the whole getup. They draped him in a Scottish flag, and they gave him a guard army, and they set him out, and the man kicked ass. Oh my gosh. I don't know how you can find the French stream, but he was playing on that a couple times. At one point in time, they put him into Eldar. Said, "Hey, bro, you're getting bussed. Have fun." They had a little bus for like a 6-month-old child with the like holes in the top in different shapes and little pieces that go in the top to learn your shapes. And they were like, "Here, go play with the bus while you get bussed." And have something to entertain you while you're getting tabled. And he's like, "Oh, awesome, great." And I walk over there and I'm like, yeah, he's playing a double Wraith Knight. Terrible matchup for guard. And I walk over and I'm like, "Oh, cool, how's it going?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm getting bussed, so it goes." And I walk away and I come back half an hour later and both Wraith Knights are in combat with 3 Scout Sentinels each. And I'm like, "What the hell is going on, Ben?" And he's like, "Dude, I called the WA, dude. We're going in." Like, "All right, Ben. Cool, man. Whatever." And I come back 20 minutes later and one of the Wraith Knights is dead. And I'm like, what? And he's like, "Yeah, dude, you shoot at it and it dies." And I'm like, all right, cool. Come back 20 minutes later, the other Wraith Knight is dead. "Okay, Ben, props." Come back 20 minutes later, and he has a Medusa carriage, the artillery piece that moves 2 inches, on the Eldar player's home field objective. Mans was an absolute stud and a champion. I really hope they get him on some other shows. We might have to get him on ours, though we've got a lot of stuff going on right now, so I don't know how many more shows we'll be doing in the near future. But what an absolute king. Absolute props to Ben for going in. He had played 0 reps with guard. They had him play 1 practice game into their Thousand Sons player the day of the event, of like, "Hey, here's how guard works." And he 20-0'd him in the practice game.
Ben's
I heard he
absolute
played a first shooting phase.
Yeah. So turns out guard pretty good in teams environments, and Benjamin McJurek, they also bought him a plot of Scottish land to make him a Scottish lord. He's having a great time. I think he's getting a tattoo at this point. He's so deep on the Scotland stuff. So mad props to him, the greatest guard player in all of Scotland, Benjamin McJurek. Absolute legend. Sweet. Okay. Anything else you guys want to say about WTC before I plug some stuff and wrap us up for the week?
Go for it, dude.
Absolutely. So, the big thing that we need to plug is Charity Hammer, boys. It's Charity Hammer time, or rather, it's almost Charity Hammer time. Just a couple of weeks coming up. Charity Hammer, for those of y'all who don't know, is the best in tabletop major event of the year. It is the reason that this network exists, is all about this awesome thing that's going to happen. We're going to have a whole bunch of the best players from all around the Pacific Northwest and a couple players flying in from further than that, participating in, I believe, it's like a 72-hour streamathon at this point. I don't remember how many hours it is. Wargames Live is going to be out here. He's going to be helping run a lot of the streams for that stuff. And it is a giant charity event is what it is. We are raising money, as always, for Child's Play, which is an organization that procures books and toys and games and video games and whatnot for children in hospitals in life-threatening situations, and also women and children in domestic violence shelters in the U.S., Canada, and I believe they're even starting to do some stuff in Europe. It is the best cause as that we are a part of, and donating to this cause as a part of Charity Hammer gets you entered in to raffles to win all sorts of great Warhammer prizes. I know that there are multiple like masterclass level painted armies that are getting raffled off as a part of this. And then also just tons of material and opportunities to put your name up in Charity Hammer Gold. So get ready for that. It's going to be a bunch of nonsense. There's going to be a giant GT. There's going to be a bunch of craziness. There's a team event happening that's in the works. It's going to be really cool. That's going to be, I think it's the second weekend of September. It's going to be a ton of fun. Some amount of us are going to be there, hopefully, assuming that we can all get our work stuff figured out. I'll definitely be there. It's going to be great. It's going to be, you're not going to want to miss it, so look forward to that. If you want to get all the details about that, make sure that you are subscribed to us on YouTube. We'll be posting tons of stuff about that here. Leave us a like and a comment to be really appreciated. If you want to get more content from us, if you don't have enough, you can join us on Discord via the Patreon or YouTube memberships. To keep the conversation going. On the YouTube, we'll also be finally putting out 10th edition bit reps soon. It's going to be a minute because we're still in different places and setting up. We're in the middle of moving right now, so we're getting a new studio set up. But let me tell you, once that's up and running, it's going to be real nice. So look forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to check out the other shows on the network while you're here. We've got This Week in Not Playing 40K. We've got Best Overall. We've got... those are the three main shows that are running right now. And we've got, of course, got the original Best in Faction, the old generation that I think is doing a show. I don't think they're doing a show tomorrow. Maybe next week. Anyway, it's all good stuff. If you like our silly little icons or shirts that look like this, that says Stomp 'em Good, they have Lucas on them. You can check over at bestintabletop.com/store. Check out any of those. Really appreciate that stuff. And I think that's all the damn plugs. If there's something I didn't plug that I should have, cool. I don't think there's any Pacific Northwest tournaments that we need to be plugging right now. Nothing's coming up super soon. Harbor Heresy is going to be later in September, run by Jason Bird up in Hoquiam, Washington. That's going to be a real good time. But if you live up here, you know about Bird, you know about his events. And
so keep your ears open for a potential North American 8v8 teams event that's in the works. Soon, TM.
Be ready. Be excited. It's going to be real cool. Anyway, with that all being said and done, thank you so much for listening to this nearly 3-hour monstrosity. We'll be talking more about all sorts of stuff. At Charity Hammer especially, expect a lot of like reminiscing about WTC and hearing a bunch of cool stories and stuff like that. Because we're all going to be there. McJurek's going to be there. John Lennon's going to be there. I think that's all the members of the team that are going to be there that we're planning on right now. But yeah, it's going to be a real good time. Hope to see you there. With that all being said and done, thank you so much for listening. I've been Tyler.
I've been Nick.
I'm still Lucas, baby.
And we'll see you next time for, God, who knows, balance patch content. Catch you later, boys.
Something. Bye.